This guy can destroy anything with a single thrust. People thought it was some kind of special ability, but it was just a simple thrust. But before that happened, we have to go back to the very beginning. Birds rest on a utility pole under the sunny sky. Meanwhile, a young man grabs a bag of chips as the TV announces the upcoming news. Noticing the package is already open, he drops its contents on the floor. A little girl approaches and asks if he's the thief who ate her snack. Suddenly, the news reports an earthquake near Seoul. Experts warn that the tremor scale is gradually increasing. Inside the store, people stare fearfully at the street, trying to understand what's happening. Without warning, a massive structure of earth and stone erupts from across the street. The impact sends huge rocks flying into the air. Moments later, the store's windows shatter from the shockwave. Amid the chaos and dust, the little girl cries in despair. Lights flash as someone yells that they've already called an ambulance for the injured. Covered in dust, the young man lifts the child into his arms and asks if she's okay. Calling him Mr. Thief, the girl glares at him, and he turns away, confused. All around them, the store is in ruins, with people lying among the debris. Under the night sky in England, a mysterious tower emerges. In Japan, similar structures appear in several cities, including Seoul. Gripped by fear, people start calling them the Nightmare Towers. Soon, the message congratulates those chosen to become tower walkers and save the world. Someone asks what it means to be a walker and accepts the call. Suddenly, a young man is startled by a glowing screen before his eyes. All who accepted are transported inside the towers to fight. Items and skills appear through a game-like interface. But they quickly realize it's no game when they see danger warnings in the sky. A projection reveals an imminent cosmic impact and shows what's happening outside. Workers stare at the base of the massive tower that has appeared in the city. One of them looks up and asks what that thing is. When they see someone at the top of the structure, they shout for someone to call for help. From high above, a dark wing slowly unfurls. A horned demon roars, leading a horde of creatures that advance on its command. Soon, a siren wails across the city, warning of the tower impact, an event where monsters escape from the towers. Explosions ravage the city as people run in despair. War tanks advance, firing at the emerging threats. Among the wreckage, a green monster with huge tusks roars, ready for battle. Dark, winged creatures dive down on it amidst the destruction. As a result, a third of the world's population was lost, and the cities were left in ruins. Inside the tower, no one could do anything but watch the tragedy unfold. Soon, the message to become a tower walker and save the world reappears. The chosen ones reflect on the weight of the mission forced upon them. They decide that if they can conquer the tower, they can end this nightmare. With special powers and abilities, they become humanity's last hope. Determined, the walkers advance through the depths of the tower. Waging battles against giant monsters, they fight to prevent the end of humanity. A man touches the ice wall and limits what the world has become. Facing the obstacle, one of the walkers suggests breaking it to clear a path. Before anyone can answer, a club smashes through, destroying the ice in a single blow. On the other side, a man notices something on the ground and alerts their leader. As they get closer, they find a glowing stone and wonder what it means. The screen appears, identifying the item as the Stone of Regression, capable of sending them back in time with their memories intact. Inchin Huang, the leader of the Tower Walkers, holds the stone and announces he will test it. As he shatters the artifact, an intense light explodes from his hand. He stares into the flash as the energy completely consumes him. The others watch the light expand, filling the entire space. Soon, the glow vanishes into thin air, and everyone wonders if he's gone. One of them questions if Inchin can even return, since he should still exist in the present. Sakamoto, a former science teacher, adjusts his glasses and says he understands what happened. He explains that Inchin did indeed go back in time, but their timelines have split. Drawing on theories of multiverses and parallel universes, he describes the division of worlds. The moment Inchin returned, his world and theirs were severed forever. Turning to the confused group, Sakamoto states one certainty. Inchin's return to the past, he claims, changes nothing for their present. He explains that the tower's items have never lied about their functions. Sakamoto holds up a fragment of the stone, theorizing it might open a path to other timelines. He concludes that the items in this tower surpass all limits of imagination. Meanwhile, a storm of red lightning begins to form in the sky. Without warning, a second tower impact strikes the outside world. With monsters advancing, the walkers are forced to decide what to do. More creatures emerge from the tower, determined to eradicate what's left of humanity. Facing the chaos, they must choose between using the Stone of Regression to go back to the past or staying here and fighting to the end. Suddenly, a giant tentacled monster charges the group. The creature grabs one of the walkers and crushes him as he screams for help. Injured and trapped, two survivors decide to use their stones, accepting their fate. Other walkers vanish in beams of light, leaving one of them completely alone. One of the last ones apologizes, saying there's no hope left, and disappears in a flash. The young man falls to his knees, exhausted and his feet wounded. The tentacle monster then lunges to attack him with its tooth-filled maw, but a mysterious figure suddenly appears, crossing two daggers before the beast. In the blink of an eye, the newcomer defeats the creature with a single strike. Landing softly on the ground, he observes the defeated enemy. With a slight smile, he turns to the young man and asks if he's okay. Still panting, the young man looks back in the direction the others fled. In the distance, he sees the mysterious man rejoin a group of warriors. commenting that everyone else retreated. The man thanks the young man for staying until the end. Now, hope rests in the hands of those who resisted the temptation of the Stone of Regression. They didn't go back to the past. They chose to fight for the present. Then the group's leader calls everyone to move forward, and together they press on as humanity's last defenders. Lying amidst the wreckage, a man struggles to breathe on the ground. His battle-scarred face gazes at the devastated landscape around him. Lying among the rocks, he wonders where it all started to go wrong. In a distant memory, someone makes a solemn vow. Soon after, a warrior charges a giant monster. Defying it, his companion runs and yells for Jawan to attack now. Leaping through the air, he lunges toward the creature. Alongside his partner, he reads a combined attack. They both grip the same sword to deliver the final blow. In one swift motion, the blade vanquishes the creature. Amidst the fallen foes, he asks if there were any casualties. His partner assures him there weren't, saying the injured will recover soon. Meanwhile, another group of walkers recovers, confident they can reach the final floor. They wave and smile, full of hope. Jawan and his friend return the gesture, but something catches his eye. Before him appears the sword Wormsbane, forged to defeat a dragon. Wielding the new weapon, he agrees with Yunwan that they will make it to the end. Smiling, he firmly believes they will reach the top floor. But in the present, he recalls how everything seemed to be under control. On the 98th floor, he faces a skeletal dragon about to breathe fire. Around him, exhausted companions lie among the flames. Turning quickly, he tries to react to the attack. The monster strikes with its claw in a powerful blow. Its paw smashes into the ground, creating a crater. Thrown by the impact, he crashes hard onto the ground. He then realizes all their effort was for nothing. Images of his friends and their time together in the tower flash through his mind. His soot-stained face reflects pure despair. As the dragon readies another attack, he wonders if he'll be defeated so pathetically. The creature's flames glint in his eyes. From above, the dragon spots a small, winged figure flying toward it. With two swords, Yunwen charges forward in a spinning slash. Leaping, he strikes the monster's head, which lets out a thunderous roar. The blows crack open fissures in the beast's rocky skin. Yunwan yells for Jawan to snap out of his trance. He then lands on the dragon's back amidst the searing heat. Pushing off again, he leaps high into the air, away from the creature. He cries out that he can't defeat it alone. Suddenly, the dragon fires an energy beam from its eye. Jawan watches, unable to react. Yunwan is hit head-on and falls onto the beast. In despair, Jawan screams his friend's name. The dragon's tail slams the ground, shaking everything around them. Stomping repeatedly, the creature lets out a triumphant roar. Soon after, a devastating explosion hits Jawan directly. From the rubble, he rises, his gaze fixed forward. His face covered in dust, he grits his teeth and prepares to fight. Running toward the dragon, he gathers what's left of his strength. Suddenly, his eye glows with an unusual light. Wielding an energy sword, he faces the beast without hesitation. Then he notices a strange light emanating from a nearby rock. Sprinting forward, he heads toward the glow. Resolutely, he faces the dragon, determined to end the battle. The creature watches him back, ready to attack. Leaping onto the monster's head, he strikes it with the glowing blade. The colossal body begins to melt slowly. In a few seconds, the dragon dissolves into a pool of lava. Coughing from exhaustion, Jawan calls for Yunwan so they can leave. But when he turns, he finds his friend lying motionless on the ground. A monstrous hand closes among the debris. The truth hits him, and he wonders who he really is. Fallon, Yunwan apologizes with a final smile. Jawan watches his friend still amidst the devastation. Yunwan Kim was known for his infectious optimism. That's why the walkers called him the Smiling Knight. But in that moment, the Smiling Knight's smile lost its shine. Jawan turns to him and tells him to just leave. He asks his friend to go before he changes his mind. From a distance, he watches Yunwan lying motionless. The warrior then slowly walks away from the battlefield. In a faint voice, he asks if Jawan has finally understood the truth. Showing a common stone, the monster calls it pathetic. Climbing the steps, Yunwan states that Jawan is stronger than he thought. He believes that if anyone can reach the top of the tower, it's him. He repeats that if anyone can make it, it's Jawan. With conviction, he says the world is lucky to have him as its defender. Then, he vanishes, leaving only leaves on the ground. Jawan approaches the gate where his friend departed. A golden leaf lands softly in his hand. Memories of his smiling companions flash through his mind. Turning around, he decides he must continue the journey. Suddenly, the doors to the next floor open before him. An intense light bursts from the newly formed passage. His face battle-scarred, he stares silently into the glow. As he steps through the portal, he finds a vast landscape covered in ice and snow. An intense blizzard covers everything around. Jawan pushes forward, fighting against the freezing wind. Ice projectiles explode near him, carving craters into the ground. Suddenly, a wall of crystals rises from the ground. The force of the blast throws him back. A gigantic ice monster emerges from the shadows and scoffs, asking if the rat has finally given up. Layers of ice begin to form over the creature's hand. Jawan stands firm, replying that he hasn't, and taunts the monster, asking if it's tired of playing around. Another powerful attack hits him head-on. Inside a cave, he tries to catch his breath. Wounded, he slides to the ground and leans his back against the icy wall. Outside, the monster sniffs the air, searching for him. Jae-won hears the footsteps and thinks about how he's been stuck on the 99th floor for 10 years. He recalls that reaching the previous floor was hard, but this one is the most dangerous. He pours a potion over his frozen arm, watching the ice slowly melt. Using his healed arm for support, he gets up. As the footsteps get closer, he remembers the guardian of this floor, the ice dragon, whose breath is nearly impossible to withstand. He thinks he would have been defeated long ago if not for the equipment left behind by others. He mentions the sword from the 85th floor and the ice demon armor given to him by Yunwan. Then he looks at his wrist. The Fire King's bracelet glows faintly. The memory of Soil flashes in his mind. He remembers her sitting beside him, apologizing with a gentle smile. Jae-won clenches his fist, regretting that he wasn't strong enough. The image of a stained map and his defeat flashes by. A voice calls him back to reality. A hooded man calls him by name, and he apologizes for getting distracted. The blacksmith asks if he's going to try again. Jae-won confirms, saying he'll make it this time. He drinks from his mug and declares that he's ready to win. Jade, the blacksmith of outpost, smiles and says that's good to hear. He recalls how the city was founded on the 50th floor after the Guardian's fall. Back then, the place was full of afflicted people, but no one gave up. Priests formed rescue teams to save the incapacitated. Blacksmiths in turn forged weapons and armor for free in the name of humanity. Jae-won looks at the workshop sign, reflecting in silence. Jae-won remarks that it seems Jay is the last remaining blacksmith in a topos. Jay replies that it changes nothing, since he's his only customer, and mentions the ore shortage. He explains that the supply was steady until a few months ago, but Jae-won shows no surprise. The young man states that almost no one is left in the tower. He reflects that he's lost track of time and that at least 10 impacts have occurred since then. He mentions that people have stopped answering the tower's call, even on the first floor. Jae-won concludes that there's probably no one left out there. The blacksmith pauses, watching the glowing metal. Then, he asks if Jae-won noticed anything strange on his last few trips. Hearing this, a memory surfaces in the young man's mind. He remembers the place where they found the first regression stone. There an inscription read, "A tower within a tower, a nightmare within a nightmare." But he just scratched his head at the time, thinking it was just a scribble, and replies that he didn't see anything new. Jay then reveals that Ms. Hiren disappeared a few days ago. Soon after, Inchin Huang remarks that since no one ages, there are only two possible explanations for the disappearance. The first is that they returned to the past. The memory of a wounded, smiling Yunwan crosses his mind. And the second is that they simply went down the tower. Jiaowin remembers that Hiren from the potion shop was one of the few people still offering help in a topos. The blacksmith continues hammering the hot metal in silence. Meanwhile, Jiaowon remains seated, watching the glow of the forge. Suddenly, he calls out to him. He asks Jay to share some of his skills with him. The blacksmith stops instantly, motionless, his hammer raised. Jae-won faces the ice dragon again, this time with a faint smile. The creature asks if the human has finally finished his little game of hide and seek. It then states that no human in the tower's history has ever tried to cross the 99th floor alone. But the dragon admits that Jae-won is a remarkable human, which makes him laugh. He reflects that his last compliment will come from a monster, not another man. The creature regrets having to defeat him, but says there's no way to spare him. Jae-won tells it not to be so sure, readying his sword. The dragon warns him about his precious armor. It reveals that the armor is already starting to crack. It accuses him of arrogance and declares that it's tired of playing games. Then the ice dragon gathers energy and fires a devastating beam directly at Jae-won. A colossal explosion of energy and ice sweeps across the battlefield. Soon, the shockwave destroys everything in its path. Pinned by a giant ice spike, Jae-won is unable to move. The ice monster before him stares him down, asking if he's ready to give up yet. It coldly states that the boy can fight all he wants, but nothing will change. His hands begin to freeze as the dragon declares he will remain completely alone. The creature adds that he will be miserable, as visions of his companions embrace him. The monster taunts him, telling him to snap out of his hallucinations. Injured, Jae-won just retorts that it talks too much. With a burst of strength, the boy frees himself, shattering the ice prison around him. He charges forward, unleashing a flurry of attacks. The dragon scoffs, asking if piercing is all he knows how to do. The creature tells him to give up, saying it will never fall to such pathetic techniques. Jae-won reflects that he started climbing the tower too late, missing out on secret skills and classes. That's why he decided to abandon all other techniques and focus on one single thing: piercing. He recalls his relentless training, piercing enemies without end. After 50 million strikes, he became the master of the technique among his companions. At a certain point, he noticed a change in his piercing. His movements became faster, more precise, and more devastating. His technique evolved, reaching the power of a secret skill he could now use at will. Still, the fight against the dragon remains arduous. He needs to strike hundreds of times just to scratch the creature's armor. Suddenly, the dragon's roar echoes as energy gathers in its chest. Jae-won realizes too late that he won't be able to dodge the attack. His eyes widen at the imminent blow. An intense light explodes right at the spot he was attacking. In that instant, he recognizes that same light. It was identical to the one he saw on the 98th floor. Seizing the chance, he grips the hilt of his sword firmly. Channeling all his energy, he focuses it into a single devastating blow. The impact hits the dragon head-on, sending it flying back with enormous force. Sliding on the ice, Jiawen lands, panting. Wounded, he faces the monster, which insults him furiously. With a crack opened in its chest, the creature demands to know how he dared. But Jiawen regrets that the blow wasn't strong enough to defeat it in one go. The dragon's wings spread in a grand motion as it warns him not to get cocky just for landing one hit. Then, the creature takes flight, promising to end him once and for all. A beam of energy explodes from its mouth amid a roar. Right after, multiple ice projectiles rain down from the sky toward Jiawen. Leaping with agility, he dodges the aerial attack. Tired and out of breath, he realizes he can't win like this. Taking advantage of an opening, he hides behind an ice barrier for cover. From above, the dragon watches him and laments the human's fate. With disdain, it claims that if there were 10 more like him, they might have stood a chance. But Jiawen just tells it to shut up. The monster concludes that it's a shame his companions were deceived by the nightmare stone. While dodging another blow, Jiawen wonders what that stone could be. Then the dragon dives, attacking him with its sharp claws. With a quick leap, he escapes the impact that shatters the ground. The creature's furious gaze follows him through the ice. Suddenly, a door materializes behind Jiawen. On impulse, he goes through it, breathing a sigh of relief for his narrow escape. He realizes that if that final blow had reached him, he would have been defeated. The words about the nightmare stone echo endlessly in his mind. Exhausted, he collapses to the ground, panting heavily. Then, he reflects on the mystery behind the stone the dragon mentioned. 5 years pass in that frozen, motionless landscape. Finally, the ice dragon falls defeated, cracking the ground as it lands. Notifications flash before him announcing a new title and that he has reached the maximum level. With a sigh, he ignores the messages. Standing on the defeated monster's head, he grumbles about the absurd number of pop-ups. Approaching the fallen body, he asks what exactly the nightmare stones are, but the defeated creature shudders and replies in a final whisper that he already knows the answer. It states that Jiawen will find what he's looking for. From a dark energy, a weapon materializes as the creature reveals the answers are on the final floor. Picking up the item, he observes its shape and wonders if it's a sword or a dagger. The dark energy begins to bubble and spread across the frozen ground. Soon, a colossal dark gate takes shape before him. The number 100 glows on the portal, revealing he has finally reached the last floor. Determined to find out what lies beyond, he decides to enter. He walks to the portal and plunges into the darkness. Behind him, the dark energy rises in distorted shapes. Symbols float in the air and align to form the words Control Room. Jiawen emerges from the dark liquid and carefully observes the new environment. The reflection in his eye shows a strange pattern as he tries to understand where he is. All around, countless floating screens project scenes from the tower at different angles. With a fixed gaze, he wonders if this is what the tower looks like now. The images reveal the call of the tower and the city of Atopos. A voice echoes, remarking that he arrived quite quickly. Instinctively, he spins around on alert and ready to react. But the voice calms him, saying it forgot to send him an important announcement. It then complains that the system looks modern, even though it's old and annoying to use. A notification pops up, congratulating him for being the first from World 294 to complete the tutorial game. His eyes widen at the unexpected message. In shock, he questions what that really means. Amid the darkness and chaos, he stares at the screen and mentally repeats the word tutorial. The revelation leaves him completely speechless. On the frozen floor, the voice comments that he seems quite shaken. Another voice advises him not to get carried away by the news. Suddenly, the ground trembles and the surrounding liquid begins to bubble. From the shadows, a dark figure emerges, warning him not to be consumed by his own emotions. In an enigmatic tone, it adds that it might already be too late. Still, it tries to console him, saying he did very well for a mere human. Then, the entity notices something different. Jiawen remains steadfast, unfazed by the growing chaos. His determined gaze pierces the darkness before him. The creature observes and comments that he recovered faster than expected. Turning, Jiawen faces the figure and asks who it is. The being apologizes for not introducing itself sooner, explaining it was excited that someone had finally arrived alone. It soon reveals its name as Mephistopheles, a demon and the master of the Nightmare Tower he had just defeated. Jiawen asks if the real game begins now, since everything so far was just a tutorial. Mephistopheles praises his sharp perception, but says it wants to show him something first. With a gesture, beams of light cut through the dark environment. With a snap of its fingers, the demon projects a scene from the past, where confused people watch what appears to be a game. Jiawen stares at the vision, intrigued by the glow of the Door of Light. A memory takes shape, showing Soyel agreeing to join the group on that occasion. The scene shows his companions gathered, smiling to be together again. With regret, the demon comments that he will never see all those dear faces again. Finally, it enthusiastically points to a memory of a fierce battle about to begin. One of his old comrades calls out to him amidst the chaos of battle. The creature narrates that back then, no one had any idea what was about to happen. It then states that nobody knew it would all end so tragically. Mephistopheles comments that it was very moved watching that part as it shows Yunwan's final defeat. It then asks how the young man feels reliving the sadness, anger, and regret. With a twisted smile, the demon announces it will grant him another chance. It offers Jae-won the opportunity to restart the game from the very beginning. It asks if the offer doesn't sound tempting. It explains that in his world, getting a second chance with all your memories intact only happens in movies. Jae-won reflects that maybe this isn't the end, believing he could save the world by climbing the tower. He recalls the invitation that chose him to become a tower walker and protect humanity. Suddenly, he realizes it was all a mistake from the very beginning. In truth, there was never a way to stop the tower's impact. The only option they had was to keep climbing without stopping. Saving humanity was the only hope they had left. But Mephistopheles states it's sure he has already understood this. Firmly, Jae-won declares that he will not return to the past. The demon glares at him with contempt. A restrained laugh escapes its lips. Soon, the creature bursts into a loud, mocking laugh. Between laughs, it asks if he still insists on dwelling on the past. In a dry tone, it makes something very clear, stating that there is no item in this tower, not even in the entire Great Realm, that can send him back in time. Jae-won confronts it, recalling that they had found a stone of regression in the tower. Suddenly, his eyes widen in pure astonishment. The Ice Dragon's words about the Nightmare Stone echo in his mind. A stone falls before him as the demon remarks that it needs to make a small correction. Mephistopheles reveals that the item they found was not a stone of regression, but a Nightmare Stone. It calmly explains that those who used it didn't go back in time. They were just trapped in a dream. In an amused tone, it admits it never imagined seeing a species so obsessed with returning to the past. It then adds that humans are truly unique in that regard. Jae-won agrees quietly, saying that might be true. Mephistopheles then asks if he is ready to start the main game. The tutorial screen appears, congratulating him and asking if he wishes to proceed, but the demon warns him that this is just a new beginning. While assuring it's certain he will make the rational choice, Jae-won presses the no button. Surprised, the demon stares at him, and the young man thanks it for finally letting him discover the truth about the tower. The system screens begin to glitch, leaving Mephistopheles completely stunned. Among the distortions, one of them shows that the Nightmare Tower, also called the Fortress of Regret, traps everyone who answers its call in a dream. Jae-won states that he was already trapped in a dream created by the tower itself. So Mephistopheles glares at him and asks what he plans to do from here. With a firm gaze, Jae-won declares that he will defeat it, and then he will proceed to the next floor. But Mephistopheles claims there is no next floor, and the young man retorts that he no longer believes him. The demon questions if he's dissatisfied with the reward for clearing the tutorial. Stepping on a shadow on the ground, his tone changes. Soon after, the creature adopts an arrogant posture and scoffs at the situation. Mephistopheles offers him anything he desires. An item, a secret skill, whatever he wants. Jae-won replies that he doesn't need any of those things. The demon insists, asking if he doesn't want to return to his old world. Snapping his fingers, he reveals that since the tower was just a dream, there was never any real impact. Confused, Jae-won sees a memory surface. A couple stuck in traffic. Another memory shows his friends arguing about movie tickets they forgot to buy. He then recalls running through a park and noticing something strange in the sky. A powerful gust of wind hits him hard. Laughing, the creature says he's finally beginning to understand the truth. Mephistopheles reveals that no one was hurt and asks if he's surprised. With a cynical air, he comments that knowing how much humans value family, this must be good news. Then the creature snaps its fingers again, stating it almost forgot to show him the most important part. A voice asks about the patient's condition, and another replies that they remain unconscious. Approaching one of the beds, Jae-won observes his own body lying there. Surprised, he wonders if that is really him. The demon then explains that while decades passed here, only a month has gone by in the real world. The creature assures him he'll never be able to defeat it. It adds that the gap between them is wider than the one separating humans and dragons. But Jae-won just scoffs, asking if that's all. Unsheathing his sword, he warns that he's defeated a dragon before. Mephistopheles calls him arrogant for such audacity. Without hesitation, the young man lunges forward and thrusts. Back at the workshop, the door opens slowly. Wounded and holding potions, Jae-won calls for Jae, announcing his arrival. He calls out again, but the workshop seems empty and abandoned. Elsewhere, a hammer strikes incandescent metal. Now, Jae-won is at the forge, focused and covered in sweat. He reflects on trying to defeat the demon every day without even managing to scratch it. He doesn't understand why the creature won't defeat him, yet he also remains standing. Determined, he vows to keep trying for as many days or years as it takes. Mephistopheles thinks he needs to remain calm. He watches the screens and remembers he must not harm Jae-won, as he is a special product meant for sale. While eating, he reflects that he has never seen a similar case in all his years as a cultivator. The idea that cultivators refine products in 2 stages comes to mind, allowing them to adapt to the Great Realm. In the first stage, the best products are chosen during the tutorial game, like seeds. The second stage is like watering these seeds as true maturation begins in the main game. Annoyed, the demon wonders how a product dares to refuse passage to the next phase. He then considers whether he should just neutralize him, since it wouldn't affect his soul. Even so, he worries that the soul might be damaged for being too powerful. Jae-won figures it was worth waiting for the enemy to become desperate and decides to ask a question. Mephistopheles reveals that the universe is not limited to a single dimension. But the young man surprises him by saying he already knows, explaining that on Earth, they also have the multiverse theory. The creature then explains that the universe has a main dimension, the Great Realm, surrounded by countless peripheral worlds. It continues, saying that Earth, or World 294, is one of these lesser planets. The inhabitants of these worlds become products by obtaining items and increasing their stats inside the tower. Then the demon reveals that he and others of his kind are there to adjust the walkers in the game. Jaewon faces him and demands to know the reason for all this. Mephistopheles replies that it's hard to say and comments that this might not be the question he really wants to ask. Snapping his fingers, he changes the scenery. The creature faces him and asks if what he really wants to know isn't why, of all worlds, the tower was summoned in his. The demon then taunts him, asking if he isn't curious why all of this is happening to his kind. He then reveals that his world was chosen by mere coincidence. Jaewon just ends the conversation, saying that's enough, as the image of a destroyed teddy bear appears before him. Still, he insists on knowing why the demon is managing this tower of nightmares. Mephistopheles seems surprised by the question. The young man presses him, wanting to know what he gets out of it, and the demon replies that it's volunteer work. Trying to cover, he comments that even demons enjoy doing volunteer work. He makes up a story about one of his companions helping rejected walkers in a place called Paradise. Suddenly, a glowing message appears behind him. The message from his master orders him not to harm Jaewon, and the demon asks if he believes him now. But Jaewon simply replies that it's all just a load of nonsense. Jaewon remembers the moment his status window showed all his stats were maxed out. The memory takes him to an ice-covered landscape, where he confirmed he'd reached his limit. Even injured, he drank a potion to try and recover. Soon after, he looked at the screen and saw all his skills were maxed. But despite that, he still couldn't defeat the dark creature. Then he was thrown violently, landing hard in the snow. Lying there, he wondered if maxed out stats were still not enough for a human to beat a demon. He then began to suspect the problem was with the world's system itself. Suddenly, a strange image flashed in his mind. Startled, he felt a weird sensation run through his body. His eyes widened as he began to understand what was really happening. Moving forward, he realized everything around him might just be an illusion. He reached out and touched one of the golden particles floating in the air. He closed his fingers around it and the glow intensified. He watched the particles shift from smooth shapes to irregular cubes, taking on different structures. In that instant, he understood. Those particles were the fundamental matter of this world. Soon after, the message from Mephistopheles' master vanished into thin air. Back in reality, Jaewon questioned the story about volunteer work. He asked who the masters were, and the demon seemed excited by his sudden interest. Mephistopheles explained that the masters rule the Great Realm, where those who complete the main game end up. The creature then mentioned a group recommendation, leaving the young man confused. With a smile, it claimed his future would depend on the master he chose. Getting closer, Mephistopheles swore on his honor to help him find a great master, as long as he followed his orders. But he whispered this would only happen if Jaewon chose to play the main game of his own free will. Jaewon compared him to an insurance salesman, but the creature denied the resemblance. Finally, the young man agreed to his terms, and a kind of contract appeared in the air. He firmly declared he would leave that place in exactly 10 days. 9 days later, he was fighting countless skeletons. Meanwhile, Mephistopheles watched him from a couch, complaining that he was just trying to show off. The demon lamented that he was so close to convincing him, and blamed the ones who had tricked him into buying the tower. Pounding the sofa, he yelled that it was all those sneaky individuals' fault. Mephistopheles recalled buying the tower from a specialist demon, only to find out it was a first-generation item. He thought about how newer towers let you stop the tutorial without damaging the product, unlike his. In the old tower, the game couldn't be stopped without the product's consent, and Jaewon had refused to give it. Sunk into the couch, the demon complained that this is what he gets for being poor, but at least the tower still worked. Back in the present, he sighed in relief that everything would be over the next day. A status window popped up with a new message, offering Jaewon the option to end the tutorial and start the main game. Mephistopheles asked if he had memorized all the files sent, and the young man confirmed. The demon then told him to go ahead and press the accept button. Overcome with emotion, he confessed he waited so long for this moment he was almost moved to tears. But Jaewon pressed the other button, and a blast of golden energy filled the area. Shocked, Mephistopheles asked what he thought he was doing. Using the particles, Jaewon materialized a golden sword in front of him. He gripped the weapon tightly and asked if the demon still hadn't figured it out. With a determined look, he prepared to show him what he would do from now on. He moved forward, declaring he would keep attacking the demon. He explained that ever since he started seeing the particles, his strikes felt different. Every time he tried to hit the creature, he felt like something was out of place. It was as if a new kind of sense was awakening inside him. Then a completely new perception dawned on him. He attacked again, and this time the blow passed through the shadowy form. Surprised, he wondered if this was the feeling of being truly alive. Suddenly, Mephistopheles summoned the black ironwood plant from the 91st floor. He admitted he'd never met anyone like Jaewon, and that perhaps they should have done this from the start. Then, he asked if the young man didn't agree. The branches wrapped around Jaewon as the creature taunted him, stating he couldn't end the game without its consent. Mephistopheles acknowledged he was right, but revealed he had given up on getting that consent a long time ago. Trapped, Jaewon asked why the demon assumed the tutorial would last forever. He then revealed that the game automatically ends if 100 days pass after the tutorial's completion. Mephistophel declared this meant Jawan would stay right there until it was time to play the main game. Calling him by his true name, Jawan addressed him as Beastrain. He revealed that in the Great Realm, he's known as the Trickster. He then detailed that the creature was 784 years old, had been through 128 worlds, and had cultivated countless species, leaving the demons stunned. He accused him of planning to hand him over to the Reaper, the Master of Darkness. Terrified, Mephistophel demanded to know who he really was. A golden message glowed in the air, revealing one of his old pleas to the Master. With a smile, Jawan declared he was the very product the demon had been cultivating for decades. A moment later, a massive explosion of energy freed him from the dark plant's restraints. Jawan charges forward at high speed, wielding an energy sword. The blow passes through Mephistophel's shadowy form. Surprise washes over the creature at the sudden attack. Then the impact hits something invisible, sending the demon flying backward. Mephistophel lands hard some distance away. He stares at his own trembling hand, unable to believe what just happened. Then, he starts to suspect something. An energy sword forms in his hand. He wonders if Jawan is a super-adapted player. Jawan stares back, shrouded in an intense golden aura. He remembers the day he reached the 100th floor. Back then, he wondered if the tower was also just a dream. He even considered the possibility that the demon couldn't defeat him. He remembered asking himself countless times if his stats were truly too low to win. The world's structure began to fragment, showing signs of collapse. All his doubts returned as he stared at the demon's secret messages. When there was nothing left to question, he charged forward, sword in hand. It was then that Jawan finally understood the true meaning of a decisive strike. He unleashes a devastating attack that breaks through the demon's defenses. Mephistophel glares at him with fury amidst the rubble. He activates a link and his body begins to transform. A message announces that the synchronization limit has been temporarily suspended, as the demon takes on a monstrous form. The creature warns that it will no longer hold back and demands his surrender. It attacks with multiple blades, but Jawan blocks the blow, though he still gets hit. The demon recognizes that he has reached the second stage of adaptation, but calls him a mere human. In a final attack, Mephistophel strikes him hard with spikes, screaming that he can never win. Fallen and weakened, Jawan wonders if this is really the end. He gets up, ignoring the impact, and continues the fight without stopping. The blows pile up until they force the demon to defend against a storm of attacks. The creature warns him that, in the end, he'll have to play the main game and is just wearing himself out for nothing. But after a long series of strikes, Jawan surpasses his human limits and watches as all the rules crumble before his eyes. After suspecting and finally understanding the world around him, everything made sense. Finally, he had escaped what the world had defined for him. He felt truly human and began to understand. All the things that previously made no sense to him began to take shape. He realized, for example, that a line of energy worked like a link. Connecting the demon directly to the tower, the connection became clear. Jawan then charges forward and attacks the energy link with his sword. Surprised, Mephistophel reacts as he sees the young man sever the connection. Screaming, the creature claims this is more than just adaptation. A golden energy hits him head-on, and he wonders how it's possible. Crackling, Jawan's sword responds to the new power, surprising the demon. The young man lunges forward and delivers a devastating blow to the dark creature. The attack hits him squarely, sending him flying backward with great force. Amidst the debris, Jawan demands that he listen carefully, and the demon wonders if he has awakened. Jawan declares that human beings are not merchandise for demons. He states they are not products to be evaluated and priced by ridiculous standards. Then the young man says he will no longer cooperate with his game. He announces he will destroy this place, and he will proceed to the next floor as he intends to climb to the top. He guarantees that when he gets there, he will finally see it, the end of the world the demons created, and his information window goes completely dark. As the structure around them trembles, Mephistophel begs him to stop. Desperate, the creature pleads with him not to do it. Then, the demon screams that there is no next floor, but Jawan simply replies that there is. He explains that he isn't just being stubborn. The young man remembers finding enigmatic messages on several floors of the tower. In one of them, he discovered that the towers are just imitations of the nightmare at the top of the Tree of Illusion. He concludes that those messages were left by Mulak, the creator of the Nightmare Tower. A description reveals that the Nightmare Tower is the second creation of Mulak, the Demon of Dreams. Jawan says they are at the roots of the Tree of Illusion, and if there are roots, there must be a trunk. Pointing upward, he states that the way out is through the ceiling. The young man gathers a large amount of energy in his hand. Then he hurls the energy upward, destroying the tower as Mephistophel screams in despair. The system displays a calculation failure and announces that the game was not completed. A final message confirms the tutorial has ended and the scene shifts to a jungle. In the new location, Jawan clenches his fist tightly. Walking along a path, he says he has finally found what he was looking for. Roaring through the trees, a multi-headed creature displays its fury. Suddenly, Jawan finds himself surrounded by a pack of monstrous wolves. One of them leaps to attack, but the blow is intercepted mid-air with a swift movement. Turning sideways, he assesses the rest of the pack. Soon, a much larger monster charges toward him. Jawan understands a light blow won't be enough to defeat it. Striking with force, he delivers a precise blow and fells the creature. Seizing the opportunity, he removes one of the fallen monster's horns. Standing up again, he remarks that the monsters in this place are weak. From the shadows, a group of insectoid humanoids appears, startled to see a human. The creature's eyes glow with irritation. The leader points and shouts about the beast's precious 5-pointed horn. Even with his suspicion active, Jaewon realizes he doesn't understand their language structure. Holding up the horn, he asks if this is what they want and proposes a deal to find out where he is. Without answering, one of the creatures lunges with a swift strike. Jaewon dodges and warns it not to try that again or it will be its end. With his sword raised, he blocks the next attack and prepares to fight. A short time later, he is sitting on the defeated enemy. Pressing his blade against the creature, he demands to know where he is, but it replies in its incomprehensible tongue. Losing his patience, he neutralizes the creature and removes its antennae. Among the defeated enemies, he demands it speak in a way he can understand. The creature only swears it will have its revenge. Then, the creature falls silent, determined not to reveal anything. Jaewon notes that although they are weak, they have more willpower than he thought. His gaze falls upon the removed antennae. Sticking them into the ground, he remains silent for a moment. Unable to get any information, he searches a fallen pouch and wonders if there's anything useful inside. Inside, he finds a dimensional backpack that works as an inventory. Perfect, since he lost access to the system interface. Remembering Mephistophel, he calls him a liar for saying the system would work in other dimensions. Still, he realizes he can see item information with his suspicion and analyzes the stones of fallen souls. He notices that all the creatures carry one of these stones and wonders if they were jewelers. Regardless, he concludes the stones must be valuable and stores them in the bag. Jaewon decides to leave the rest of the items behind as they take up too much space. Suddenly, his sword begins to vibrate again. His gaze turns to the blade, which emits a strange hum. Twisting his wrist, he swings the sword and fires a blade of energy at the trees. Shortly after, he chews on one of the stones he had collected. As he eats, he wonders what the stone tastes like. Among the branches, he spots a fallen scroll and wonders if it's a map. Upon opening it, he discovers it's a map of the Tree of Illusion with an area marked as Chaos. Crumpling the paper, he realizes that information wasn't in the files sent by the demon. The focus returns to the dense, overgrown jungle. From the shadows, monstrous creatures emerge from the woods, growling. Suddenly, someone lands hard on the ground, followed by other figures. A red-haired woman surveys the scene with a confident smile. Soon, a strike grazes a man with dreadlocks. Apologizing, she says her dagger slipped and he decides to hunt elsewhere. Annoyed, the man decides to ignore the incident because she's pretty, until a colleague interrupts him. The group then notices a threat approaching from behind the woman. Dread sets in as they see she's provoked a two-horned beast. Pursued, the woman runs, yelling for the monster to stay away from them. From a cliff top, Jaewon watches as the group tries to regroup. He notes the girl seems to be the strongest, but concludes they'll all be defeated because they don't work as a team. Silently, he wonders how they managed to beat the Tower of Nightmares. The man with dreadlocks activates his Fire King's breath skill, and the woman says she'll help him. But the next blow hits him head-on. Once again, she apologizes, and he, furious, questions her. Indignantly, the woman retorts that she was just trying to help. As they argue, the beast prepares to attack him, and a companion yells for him to be careful. Leaping from the cliff, Jaewon intervenes in the fight. With his swift strike, his blade neutralizes the creature. The man with dreadlocks is covered in dust. The impact knocks the beast down. Jaewon lands on the defeated monster. Shocked, the man asks who he is. The red-haired woman asks if he minds if they keep the defeated monster. With a nod, Jaewon allows it, and she celebrates, but he asks if the horns are valuable. One of the adventurers explains it takes 10 people to take one down, and Jaewon concludes that monsters with more horns are stronger. The woman's suspicious gaze narrows on him. Approaching him, she demands to know who he is. She states there are almost no adapted players in Chaos and asks where he came from. Jaewon is silent for a moment. He just repeats the word Chaos, as if asking himself. Then he faces the group and directly asks what Chaos is. Surprised, the woman stares at him in complete astonishment. One of the men from the group approaches and asks if his name is Jaewon. He then asks if the young man is just passing through, and he confirms with a nod. The man finds this odd and asks if he also doesn't speak the local language. He explains that it's extremely rare for someone to have a language barrier in this place. The red-haired woman returns to the subject and asks if he's sure about the monster's body. He again gives them permission to take it. Her eyes narrow, suspicious of his claim that he's just passing through. She then recalls that Jaewon defeated the two-horned beast with a single blow without using any skills. She also remembers trying to use her own skills without success. She then realizes that her detection ability doesn't work on him. The system returns an error, and she notices his mana level is as low as an unadapted player's. Intrigued, she approaches and says she wants to ask a question. With a firm gaze, she states that there are almost no adapted players in Chaos capable of defeating a beast like that with a single blow. She demands to know who he is and where he came from, but he just stares at her in silence. A faint smile appears as he repeats the word Chaos. The woman gets angry, accusing him of toying with her and questioning why he'd say something so absurd. She asks if he's having trouble understanding her and offers to speak more slowly. Jaewon calmly replies that he understands her perfectly and reflects on her question. His mind drifts back to a time when his relationships and identity on Earth lost all meaning upon entering the tower. Instead, he made new friends and created new memories alongside his companions. but they all vanished like a mirage when the tutorial ended. He knows they are still somewhere on Earth, but if the reward was to start over with his memories intact, then they probably don't remember him or what they experienced in the tower. That's why he claims to have lost his memory. The woman is surprised and excitedly asks if he has amnesia. Floating slightly in the air, she says she doesn't believe him, but he denies saying that. She stares at him and asks if he's a warrior from the abyss. Just as his sword begins to vibrate, gripping the hilt, he tells the weapon to stop the noise. Suddenly, the blade transforms into a creature, startling the woman. Her eyes wide, she recognizes the sword as a spirit weapon. The creature begins to consume the swords and equipment scattered on the ground, leading her to conclude that he isn't strong, he just has a powerful weapon. Her companions murmur among themselves, commenting that the weapon is eating the equipment and wondering why he's showing it off to everyone. As the group watches him, Jawan asks his weapon if it's satisfied and if it can return to its sheath. The red-haired woman, annoyed, complains that he ruined her mission, claiming she could have defeated the monster on her own. Suddenly, a brilliant idea pops into her mind. Approaching him, she says she won't ask any more questions but wants to propose something related to a pushing skill. With a sly smile, she asks if he's interested in hearing her proposal. After explaining about chaos, the girl who introduces herself as Minnow reveals that her companions are bandits from the Red Fox clan. Jawan observes the group and understands that deep down she wants him to defeat them all for her. With a subtle warning, Minnow asks him not to stare at them too much, as they'll soon come after him too. As night falls, the man with dreadlocks suggests setting up camp to avoid waking the horned beasts. The group gathers around a campfire for the night. From a distance, Jawan remembers that the map he found showed a nearby village. Extending his hand, he concentrates golden particles that shimmer around his fist. Near the fire, the men comment that his mana level is even lower than an unadapted player's. The group's leader concludes that he only defeated the beasts thanks to his spirit weapon. He recalls that the only way to get a weapon like that is by entering the abyss beyond the branches of the Tree of Illusion. With this, he understands he was only accepted into the group because of the weapon, the same one the demon had said wasn't that good. Lying down, he decides to push the thoughts away for a moment. His gaze turns to the sky and he concludes that this place, after all, is not the Great Realm. Suddenly, two figures emerge running through the woods, and he realizes they're getting closer. Minnow shakes him, alarmed, warning that enemies are coming. She demands that he grab the sword he was feeding earlier and use it to defeat them. But Jawan calmly replies that he doesn't have the weapon. He explains that he lent it to the night watchman, leaving the girl in shock at his recklessness. Soon, the Red Fox clan appears holding the weapon. They thank the fool and announce they will defeat them before returning to camp. Annoyed, Minnow glares at the group and asks if they really want to fight her. Jawan just watches, looking curious to finally see her in action. Moving together, the clan members attack the two of them. Quickly, she leaves a trail of energy with her movement. She hits two of the men at once. Unleashing a powerful kick, she strikes another clan member. She spins, wielding several throwing daggers to attack. One of her daggers hits one of the men. Smiling, she apologizes, saying she didn't mean to throw it so hard. Then she floats, surrounded by daggers, and warns them that she's a little annoyed with them. She warns them they're about to face a tough battle. Suspicious of her ever since she attracted all those monsters, the man makes his accusation. He quickly identifies Minnow as the Witch of Destruction. He demands to know who from the Black Forest clan sent her. With a smirk, Minnow asks if it really matters. She justifies herself, saying chaos is full of people who want her defeated just for beating up rookies. But he laughs, stating the Black Forest clan wouldn't make a move for something so trivial. In the air, his energy daggers shatter. Summoning a spirit weapon, he deduces someone hired her and declares this is the end for her. The girl scoffs, asking if he really thinks he can face her with just that. Responding with a smile, he says he has some extra insurance. Sizing up the group, she realizes they are all First Age adapted players. Suddenly, 50 shadowy figures appear and surround them. With a sharp remark, Minnow says it's no wonder she heard so many footsteps. The clan leader assures them that facing a witch and a powerful guy, he wouldn't come unprepared. From a nearby spot, Jawan watches the situation unfold. Thinking it over, he believes he wouldn't have summoned the master if he'd known he could get a spirit weapon. Just then, a black fox appears before Minnow, and she teases him about his free time. Introducing himself as Kent, the master of the Red Fox clan, he demands the Witch of Destruction consider this an honor. He then announces that half of the Red Fox clan has come to hunt her down. With sarcasm in her voice, Minnow tells Jawan to wait, as she's not sure she can face a third-stage player alone. Calling out to the Abyss Warrior, she apologizes. With her back to him, she admits she can't protect him. Without hesitation, she throws a nightmare stone to the young man and orders him to run. Curious, Jawan asks what the item is. She explains it returns him to the nearest fortress. Stating she only has one, Minnow insists that he must use it. Crushing the stone, he thinks that it's only keeping him safe for now. Remembering the fallen Yunwan, he laments the stones that couldn't save him. He then wonders what would have happened if he could have given one to his friend. Turning to the girl, Jawan asks if she would go back in time if she had the chance. Confused for a moment, Minnow replies that of course she would. With wide eyes, Jawan states that he would never go back. Smiling, Mino says she worked too hard to get to this point. Declaring she refuses to go back, she faces the possibility of being defeated today. Touching her shoulder, he tries to comfort her. Standing right in front of the girl, he assures her she won't be defeated today. Surprised, she doesn't hide her reaction. Leaping away, Mino distances herself from Jawan. Moving quickly, he neutralizes the enemy attacking him. Announcing the Fire King's 14th technique, a Black Fox charges forward. A flaming strike is unleashed, trying to hit Jawan and his men. With his eye glowing, Jawan reaches the 3rd stage of awakening. Activating Oblivion, he attacks everyone around him. Advancing without remembering the identity the world imposed on him, he moves relentlessly. His fist lands squarely on a clan member. Then, a large slash of energy erupts from Jawan, hitting several enemies at once. The attack hits the Black Fox directly. The energy strikes the clan master with full force. Spinning around abruptly, the other leader tries to react. Appearing behind him, Jawan shatters his spirit weapon with a single blow. Standing among the fallen enemies, he receives the spirit weapon back from one of them. With it in hand, he attacks the survivors. Gripping the equipment tightly, he prepares to dominate the field. With a powerful technique, he creates a massive pillar of energy erupting from the ground. Watching the scene, Mino wonders how that isn't just a common attack. She recalls the moment she thought he was reckless for handing over the beast's horns. In her memory, her companions commented that his weapon looked like a spirit weapon. Remembering when he lent it to her, she realizes she considered him a fool, oblivious to the danger. Now, she understands she was mistaken because he's just too strong. Turning to her, Jawan calls out to her. Approaching him, Mino asks who he really is. With a smile, Jawan throws the question back at her. He stares at her, asking if she's already forgotten. Assuring her that she already knows who he is, he only gets a confused look from the girl. Teasing her about memory loss, he gets her to call him petty. Demanding the return stone back, Mino pressures him, but he claims to have lost it. Questioning the stone's price, she orders him to go look for it. Later, a campfire burns in the darkness of the forest. Stretching by the flames, Jawan relaxes. Searching for the stone, Mino complains about giving it to a stranger, while a creature nibbles on the weapon. Still calling him a stranger, she asks what he meant when he said she already knew. Replying that she already knows who he is, he simply declares he's a human being. Confused, Mino asks what he's talking about, stating that she obviously is also human. Clenching his fist, Jawan says that's enough. Staring at him, she questions his gaze. Turning to sit down, she ponders that maybe he's right. She concludes that maybe it's enough that they are both human. Confirming he remembers nothing before chaos, he answers her question. Envious of this lack of memories, Mino vents. She explains that many would envy him, since everyone ends up in chaos for obvious reasons. Not understanding, Jawan asks what she means by obvious and how she got there. Stopping suddenly, she falls silent. Warning that he'll regret the question, she resumes walking. Arriving at the Gorgon fortress, Mino announces their destination. Suspicious, the young man observes his surroundings. He wonders if this isn't like one of the invitations from the tutorial's first floor. Suddenly, a red energy envelops him. A sudden memory hits him. He again sees people screaming in despair and agony. Commenting on the newcomers, Mino asks if he now understands her point about how she got to chaos. He warns her never to ask that question to anyone there. The screams of suffering echo like a welcome. Welcoming them to the world of the fallen, she defines chaos. She explains that those who graduate from the Tower of Nightmare can be chosen by the gods of the Abyss, or they can be chosen by the masters of the Great Realm. Some of these chosen few achieve glory in battle, but most fail and fall into chaos, the stem of the Tree of Illusion. Jawan asks if chaos is where those who perish in the Great Realm go, and she confirms they become part of the tree. Lamenting having escaped the tower only to live among the fallen, he questions what the stem is. Detailing everything, the girl says the towers are the roots, chaos is the stem, and the abyss is the branches of the Tree of Illusion. Recalling Mulak's words, Jawan realizes he might not be in the wrong place. Looking at the sky, he concludes he can still reach a higher place. A man in a white uniform appears and shouts for everyone to get to work. He orders them to line up the newcomers and take them to the platform. Tossing cloaks to Jawan and Mino, he tells them to get dressed and get in line. Approaching a newcomer, he humiliates him for his fragile appearance, asking if he was a webtoon artist. Getting close to him, Mino calls him James. Asking what he's doing at the northern checkpoint, she asks for permission to enter. Receiving an apology, she hears that everyone now needs a certificate to enter, which frustrates her. Turning to Jawan, she asks if he has a certificate, and he shakes his head no. Smiling, Mino decides what she'll do. Approaching the guard, she whispers that she forgot her certificate. Offering a two-horned beast's horn as payment, the girl negotiates and he recognizes the item. Clearing his throat, James lets her pass, saying they've known each other for a long time. Blocking Jawan, the officer demands a certificate, but the young man replies that he doesn't have one. Teasingly, Mino says she'd help if he asked nicely. However, the guard insists that no one enters the fortress without a certificate. Understanding the situation, Jawan approaches her, scaring Mino with his attitude. Desperate, she wonders if he intends to confront the guards to get through. Finding it impossible for him to be that insane, Mino watches as Jawan moves forward and attacks the guards. Shocked, she watches him standing with the neutralized guards around him. Calling for her to enter, Jawan makes her believe he might actually be insane. Running desperately towards James, Mino shouts for him to wait. Confused, a guard asks what's happening. Realizing everything has gotten worse, she despairs even more. Suddenly, the guards stand at attention as he arrives. Introducing himself, Carlton appears as the stubborn inspector of the northern checkpoint and the pride of the fortress. Approaching James, Carlton demands an explanation. Understanding the case, he asks if the young man wants to enter without a certificate. Stating that it's strictly forbidden, Carlton listens as Jawan questions the reason twice. Reciting the fortress's legal code, the inspector reinforces that letting him in is forbidden. An aura of energy explodes, forcing all the guards to their knees. Forced to the ground, Mino complains that he used the legal code ability. Unsheathing his sword to restrain her, Carlton attacks, but Mino's daggers block the blow. Saying that's enough, Jawan's eye glows with blue energy. Rising to his feet, he states that he doesn't care about a silly law. Questioning what the certificates actually say, he surprises Carlton by canceling his spell. Concluding that he doesn't need any certificate, Jawan says he refuses to reveal anything about himself. Annoyed by his code's failure, the inspector invokes silver bonds to stop him. Chains of energy erupt from the ground and bind Jawan. Tightening around his body, they seem indestructible, but he shatters them all with his bare hands. Shocked, the guards stare at the feet of someone breaking Lord Carlton's chains. Staring at him, the inspector tries to understand how that was possible. Pointing at Mino, Jawan asks why he can't do the same as her. Lost, the girl doesn't understand the question. Referring to the bribe she used to get in, he clarifies. In the memory, James and his men pretend they saw nothing. Desperate, the guard and his subordinates realize they've been caught accepting a bribe. Tossing something to Carlton, Jawan acts before Mino can stop him. Catching the object in midair, the inspector examines it. Telling him to accept the item and let him in, Jawan stands his ground. Shouting indignantly, James claims he dared to bribe the inspector and should be detained immediately. Ignoring the guard, Carlton asks if his name is Jawan, and he confirms it. Smiling, the inspector declares he was waiting for him. The Lion of Nakmyeon. A device warns that Mino's spiritual contamination level has exceeded 15%. Warning her about the corrupted spirit, Carlton watches her grab an item to recover. Jawan asks what spiritual contamination is, and as she chews, Mino calls him ignorant. She explains it's a chronic disease from chaos that slowly corrodes the spirit. James announces the evacuation of the rookies, and the girl comments on the value of beast horns. She proudly shows it off, revealing the horn is the only thing that can stop the contamination. Teasing Jawan, Mino says she got one for free thanks to him. Approaching them, Carlton announces he's going to perform a scan. He points the device at the young man's face, activating its light and sound, but the display shows an error, unable to measure the contamination. Questioning what it means, James watches the screen change. 0% appears as the result. Understanding what this means, the inspector grabs Jawan's hand. As Carlton returns the Fallon soul stones, he hears Jawan ask if he doesn't need them. Stating that such stones aren't given away easily, Jawan denies being Nakmyeon. Smiling, Carlton replies that he knows. James looks unsure, asking if he's really going to let him pass. He asks if the young man understands what the Fallon soul stones are. Jawan replies that they increase mana. Shocked, James stares at the inspector. A purple energy envelops Carlton's hand, and the guard panics at the stone's effect. Confirming with a nod, the inspector explains that only someone from the Nakmyeon family can carry them without being contaminated. Saying he doesn't trust him, Carlton states he believes in his soul, even though he doesn't seem to be from the family. Recalling the scan, he assures them the device didn't malfunction. Not understanding, James hears him conclude there's only one explanation. The young man's soul is purer than any other in chaos. Declaring it doesn't matter where he comes from, Carlton states they need someone who can handle the stones. Following the inspector, James asks if this has to do with the Lord situation, but he says he isn't sure. Stopping abruptly, Carlton turns around. Saying it looks like James took a bribe to let someone in, he places the blame on him. Walking through the confusing streets, Jawan complains about the city's maze-like layout. With a crooked smile, he comments on the extra burden he's carrying, and Mino questions who is leading whom. In a flashback, Carlton warns her to never forget her certificate and forbids bribes. Wishing them a good stay, the inspector just watches as Jawan pulls her away. Walking across a bridge, Jawan calls out to a man, annoyed as he remembers the inspector's ability. He asks if there's any blacksmith who can handle a sword like his, but the man is doubtful. Nearby, a man watches the situation with a curious smile. Someone walks down a dark corridor. Mino hears approaching footsteps. She asks when they entered the city, while Jawan asks if she's feeling better. He turns and says it's time for her to go her own way. The girl runs after him, apologizing and outraged that he wants to just discard her. Jawan states she's already helped him enough and would only be a burden now. He turns to face her. Then he says the two of them are different. He then walks away, saying they should each follow their own path. Mino grinds her teeth. The wind blows out the candle flame. The girl dashes toward him, saying he doesn't know the area and could get into trouble. Jawan replies he can just ask for directions, but she insists she can guide him. He stops and listens. Then he reveals he's looking for a dream demon. She says she knows where to find one and offers to take him, and he accepts. But the young man stops her before they can proceed. He comments that it seems some men want something from them. A group of thugs surrounds them, saying they finally found them because of the sword. Mino tells them to get lost or they'll regret it, and one of them calls her sassy. The leader approaches and warns her to watch her mouth. He says it's not good to talk like that to the younger ones, as Junior is very temperamental. He then demands the sword and a toll payment for them to pass. Jawan ignores the threat, while Mino finds the name Junior strange. The leader boasts that they don't know who they're messing with. Mino is indignant, questioning how that man could be a junior. The brute lunges with his axe, saying she said a rude word and needs to be punished. Jawan blocks the attack with a swift move of his sword. The impact generates a massive blast of energy. He stands over the fallen enemy and complains that people there talk too much. Jawan gets into a stance with his weapon, ready for combat. He taunts them, telling them to hurry up and come at him. The fallen man starts to cry out in pain. The leader trembles with rage, shouting that nobody messes with his precious Junior. He vows revenge, but a companion corrects him, saying Junior is still standing. The boss then orders the attack, promising to show them what happens to those who mess with them. Jawan waits, firm and ready to fight. Mino praises him for the fight and asks about his other skills, but he reveals he only knows how to use his blade. She then remembers someone else who also uses only one skill and questions him about the attack that went off course. The girl asks why he damaged the roof of the building across the street, implying he lost control. Jawan begins to explain. He explains that while fighting the thugs, someone was watching him from afar with a concealment skill, and he wanted to scare the intruder away. Mino is shocked and suggests names for his skill, but the young man ignores her and tells them to keep walking. They arrive at a stall where a vendor greets them. The girl points to the Twilight Forge, the largest in Gorgon, founded by a dream demon. A young man approaches and asks if they've come to place an order. Naven, the forge worker, warns them it might take a while, even if they order today. Jawan asks why, and he explains that the head blacksmith is out and the vice foreman is busy testing the workers. One of the blacksmiths suggests they look at the finished products, and the apprentices are mesmerized by a sword. He explains that the weapon is made from the horn of a four-horned beast and just needs a socket for a gem. Two apprentices eagerly volunteer to drill the hole. The vice foreman, Michael Garnad, says the material is hard to even crack, let alone drill. Then he announces that whoever can make a hole in the sword will be vice foreman for a day. The apprentices try but fail, and one of them even breaks his own hammer. Garnad calls them weak and gets angry that they can't handle such a simple task. Naven regrets not having a chance until Jawan approaches. The young man tries to stop him, saying he isn't authorized to enter right now. Jawan then offers to give it a try, and the workers start speculating that he's a traveling craftsman. The vice foreman warns him about the difficulty, but Jawan points and asks if he wants the hole in that spot. While Garnat explains that most people fail Jawan strikes, a loud metallic sound echoes through the forge, surprising the vice foreman. Garnat's eyes widen in shock. Jawan removes his finger from the sword. He asks if that means he's now the vice foreman for the day, but the sword begins to crack in his hand. Soon, the weapon shatters and Jawan apologizes, saying it broke by accident. Furious, the vice foreman grabs him by the collar, yelling about the cost of the horn. Jawan reflects that he tried to be gentle. Mino and Navan are dumbfounded, and she questions if that could really be called being gentle. The young man explains that breaking the horn isn't hard, just breaking it the right way is, and apologizes again. Furious, Garnad questions if an apology will solve the situation. He grabs Jawan by the collar, shouting about the value of the horn destroyed over a simple bet. The young man offers to give something better in return, but the blacksmith doubts he has anything of value. Searching through his belongings, Jawan pulls out a 5-pointed horn and asks if this is better. The apprentices are stunned by what they see. One of them identifies the item as a Garnex horn. Jawan asks if that covers the damages, and the vice foreman, amazed, confirms that it more than makes up for it. Then the young man asks if he can use the forge for a while. Garnad turns around with a serious expression and orders his men to close the door. The apprentices respond promptly and obey the order. The vice foreman invites him inside, while Mino says she's going to step out for a moment. A close sign is hung on the forge's door. Garnad introduces the Twilight Forge and tells Jawan he can use anything he wants since he's the vice foreman for the day. Jawan thanks him, and the blacksmith asks where he found the Garnax horn. He replies that he got it himself. Garnad, shocked, asks if he defeated a 5-horned beast, and the young man confirms it. Impressed, the blacksmith listens as Jawan asks for help making a sheath, and he claims to have repaired a few before. The vice foreman, surprised, asks if he really said sheath. He then questions if Jawan really wants to make a sheath with a 5-horned beast's horn. Garnad takes the young man's sword and asks what's so special about it. He identifies it as a rare replica of the Frost Serpent's blade, made by a dream demon. The blacksmith considers it overkill to use a Garnax horn for the sheath and suggests making a new sword with it instead. But the sword reacts to the horn and absorbs it, surprising Garnad. Startled, he realizes it was a spirit weapon as pieces of the horn hit him. The vice foreman concludes that the sword is possessed by the soul of a higher species and wonders how it ended up there. Observing the weapon, he says that since it's evolving, it will need to be renamed. Jawan asks about the new name, and Garnad explains that spirit weapons lose their original names after a major evolution. He warns that the sheath will need to be made from another material, but Jawan reveals he has another horn. Amazed, Garnad watches the young man pull another 5-pointed horn from his bag. Remembering it's a 5-horned beast, he wonders what the young man was thinking. Jaewon asks how the blacksmith would like his help, and Garnad replies that he wants to see him work first. Agreeing, he asks how Jaehyun wants the horn to be shaped. The young man smiles and tells him to decide, since he's the professional. Garnad is taken aback but soon declares that he'll show him the skills of a dawn craftsman. Inside Gorgon's inner castle, a man apologizes to his superior. He then reports losing sight of the target after he defeated the bandits in the street. Jurgen Cheever, Gorgon's prime minister, listens to the entire explanation in silence. The minister then asks how the target got the drop on him, but the man doesn't know. He says that when he regained consciousness, he was already lying on a rooftop. The hooded man simply stared at him for a moment. Jurgen then asks if this means the target saw him. He concludes that if the target could detect a 3rd stage player, he must be at least a 5th stage. Therefore, the minister orders his subordinate to gather a team and search the entire city. Alone in his office, Jurgen remains seated at his desk. With a weary gesture, he pinches the bridge of his nose. His gaze fixes on a distant point. With a clenched fist, he mentally addresses his lord. He promises that he only needs to wait a little longer. Meanwhile, inside a tavern, a voice catches everyone's attention. On a large screen, a holographic host announces the end of the weekly program. However, she says the final video is a clip familiar to everyone. Siren then introduces the most talked about video of the moment, showing the solo clearing of the 99th floor. On the screen, a man covered in an intense energy appears. Some of the tavern patrons wonder what happened to the guy in the video, and one of them claims to have news. He explains that the exploration of that tower was halted, though he doesn't know why. Two men start arguing about the rumors, suggesting the video is fake and that the guy ran away. Another customer asks the bartender for another 1-horned beer. A wooden mug slams down hard on the counter. Mino appears in the center of the tavern. Everyone present turns to watch her cross the room. She sits alone on a stool at the counter. A man approaches, trying to talk to her. Mino, however, gives him a cold stare and tells him to get lost. He backs away immediately and gives up. Alone again, Mino wonders why she's in such a bad mood. Stepping on a fallen leaflet, she orders a very strong drink. The tavern keeper watches her as the young woman complains. Slamming her mug on the table, Mino complains that the guy is impossible to deal with and thinks he's a big shot. But Claire, the bar owner, scolds her and tells her to stop grumbling since she isn't even drunk. She asks why Mino stays close to him, and the girl admits she's not really sure. Then, she slams the mug down again and shouts that she gets angry every time she sees him. The memory of how he destroys everything around him comes back to her, and how he wields his sword as if none of the rules in this place matter. In the memory, Jaewon just says that's enough. Mino admits that half the time she doesn't even understand what he's trying to say. She mentions that he picks fights without knowing anything about chaos. In her memories, the guy simply states that she's not human. Finally, he declares that the two of them are different. Back in the present, Mino holds her mug in silence on the counter. She says the guy makes her feel like nothing and scratches the counter with her claws. She yells that everyone worked so hard to get here, but he just showed up out of nowhere. In a memory, Jaewon asks if she would seek out a dream creature for revenge. He, however, assures her she wouldn't understand even if he explained. Back in the present, Mino lets out a scream of pure frustration. Claire then places a hand on the girl's head and advises her to stay away from him for good. Mino tries to protest, but the tavern keeper cuts her off. She warns that if Mino stays by his side, she could end up in great danger. Mino asks what she means by that, but a golden light hits the tavern door. The brightness spreads through the room, and the girl turns to watch. From within the light, a golden bird emerges and hands her a scroll. She examines the seal and finds it's a letter from Carlton Javier, inspector of the Northern Forest checkpoint. Puzzled, Mino wonders why the persistent man would seek her out, just as a man asks if she is the Witch of Destruction. Surprised, she turns around at the question. With her hand on her dagger, she admits that some people do call her that. Suddenly, a hand grabs her wrist tightly before she can draw the blade. A huge man approaches and says he's busy, asking her to do something for him. Meanwhile, inside the forge, Garnad shatters the material with a sledgehammer blow. Right after, he screams and falls to his knees. A gigantic creature appears before him and declares that his presence is not allowed there. Garnad screams and asks how he could possibly forge a beast like that. He remains paralyzed, breaking into a cold sweat at the sight of that world. Jaewon then grabs him by the shoulder and yells for him to wake up. He reminds him that they were forging the sword, but the blacksmith just stammers. The creature attacks again, and Jaewon demands that if he's going to help, he better do it right. Doublefault. The horn begins to crack under the weight of the hammer blows on the anvil. Garnad stops, panting, saying he can't go on. The item is just too advanced for him. But Jaewon covers his eyes, explaining that this is the first stage of awakening. Suspicion. He states that everything depends on how you see things, and the blacksmith's eyes begin to glow with understanding. Garnad's eyelid twitches for a moment. The material on the anvil bubbles, turning into a dark puddle. Suddenly, the substance explodes upward in a violent jet. Jaewon gets hit in the face and asks what's happening. The blacksmith watches the scene completely motionless. The formless mass rises before them and takes the shape of a monstrous creature. The beast attacks and Jawan yells for him to wake up. He glares at him firmly and demands that if he's going to help, he should do it right. Garnad panics as he realizes this is the true nature of the five-horned beast. He convinces himself it's all just a dream and that he needs to wake up. Screaming that it's only a dream, he runs toward the creature. Jawan just sighs at the blacksmith's reaction. Garnad runs in despair, begging for help. His eyes widen in terror at what he sees. Skeletal figures appear before him, and one of them calls him Assistant Blacksmith. Trembling with fear, he hears the creature ask if he's finished forging the item. The skeleton approaches slowly. In a harsh voice, it scolds him, saying he's a fool who doesn't deserve to see this place yet. Sweat drips down the blacksmith's face as he remains paralyzed. He wonders how a place like this can even exist as he takes it all in. Jawan drives his sword into the creature's head. Garnad wonders how he ended up in a world like this. The creature lets out a sharp shriek. Jawan leaps and strikes it with a hammer blow. He fixes his determined gaze on the beast. Then, he charges forward to continue the attack. The sledgehammer strikes the creature dead on with a precise blow. The powerful impact tears through the monster's body. Garnad clutches his head and yells, asking why this is happening to him. A voice then says that some things are a pure waste of time, like trying to overcome one's own limits. In a memory, a blacksmith tells Jawan he should have come to him sooner. He adds that the young man should have sought out the chief blacksmith, the Dream Demon. Jawan replies that species doesn't matter. He just needs a scabbard to keep going, but the blacksmith scolds him, ordering him to try a million more times since he's still young. The man recalls when Jawan said he had tried his best for him. He remembers that after mastering every skill, he was 99% certain he could fix any weapon, and it was at that point that a strange thought occurred to him. The blacksmith wonders if, in truth, he wasn't just running away from that last 1%. A notification appears informing Jawan that he has reached the maximum level. The young man then asks if the blacksmith truly understands how the shaping skill works. He explains that the Dream Demon's technique is primordial, something that has always existed, like water or fire. Jawan asks if the blacksmith has been using the skill all this time without even understanding it. Garnad just stares at him in silence, unable to answer. He tries to justify himself, saying he strengthens the tools with mana and shapes the horn through that power. But Jawan counters, asking why the other workers can't use the same skill if it's so simple. The blacksmith then realizes that if the principle were that basic, the others should at least be able to imitate it. The other blacksmiths react in surprise, and one of them shouts that skills are meant to be used. Turning around, Garnad asks if Jaehoon really knows how shaping works. The young man admits he didn't know before, but he just figured it out and touches the horn in front of him. Under his touch, the horn begins to liquefy, and the blacksmith stares at him, stunned, asking how he's doing that. Jaewon then asks everyone to watch closely and describe what they see. One of the men comments that the particles seem to be splitting, and Jaewon warns that the process won't be easy. He explains that all the blacksmith's effort has ended up hardening the barriers of the world he perceives. Garnad wonders if the mistake was trying too hard, but Jaewon states that the problem is with the world, not him. In a memory, a dream demon tells him he did well, but that's just the way of demons. The demon concludes that, as a human, he would never be more than an apprentice. The blacksmith questions if this is just a human limitation, but he refuses to accept it. In his memories, he asks Jaewon what he means and if he should fight against the world itself. But the young man replies that what's fair is telling someone they can do something, and that Garnad can still fight. He then instructs him to try again, but this time using his own eyes instead of relying on the system. The blacksmith's gaze reflects the image of the creature before him. In that instant, he sees the true nature of that world. Garnad realizes he's in a place with no skills or interfaces. He recognizes it as an honest world, free of deception, and grips his tool tightly. The blacksmith yells that he still doesn't understand. With a precise strike, he drives the tool into the horn. Outside the workshop, Garnad asks if Jaewon is leaving already. The young man confirms, saying he got what he came for. He remarks that the sword seems happy, and the blacksmith asks if he has chosen a name for it yet. Garnad offers to name it, and Jaewon agrees with a slight nod, revealing the name Dokbul. The blacksmith hears the young man ask if it means solitary hero. Garnad smiles and confirms that it seemed like the perfect name for the sword. He says goodbye, and Naven asks the customer to come back again soon, but the blacksmith suddenly calls out to him, asking him to wait. He grabs the young man's cape with both hands. He asks what he looks like in the world that Jaewon sees. Jaewon turns and replies that he looks human. The blacksmith just stares at him in silence. As the young man leaves without looking back, Garnad wonders if anyone will ever understand his world. Mino asks why Jaewon keeps following her, and he replies by asking if she's afraid he's up to something. He presses the question, and she turns around. She gets closer and asks how he found out. Then she declares she's going to kill him. Jaewon, however, wants to know why. He suggests that maybe she wants to live comfortably by selling her fallen soul stones, and Mino confirms she's serious. The young man hands her a bundle of clothes as an apology, saying he's tired of seeing her dressed like a beggar. Mino asks what he'll do now that he didn't find the dream demon. Jaewon replies that Michael told him how to find it, and then asks about the Tree of Illusion and the path to the Abyss. She questions why he wants to go there and asks if he doesn't want to know her goal. Mino mentions that those who return from there are called Abyss Warriors, but Jaewon states he has no intention of coming back. His answer leaves her completely stunned. Jaewon stops walking, and Mino stares at him, confused. She grabs him and demands to know what right he has to do something like that. She accuses him of acting without a care for anyone, calling him selfish and grumpy. She adds that he doesn't even consider the people of this world to be human. She yells that, unlike him, she and the others are human, and she finishes by stating that she is human too. In a flashback, Mino declares she refuses to go back in time, even if she dies that day. Elsewhere, Garnet works hard at his forge. Suddenly, a voice warns him not to get any funny ideas and orders him to lure the young man. Jaewon realizes they're holding a hostage to get to him. He spots the men in an alley across the street, but he decides there's no reason to get involved and rescue the hostage. He concludes that saving people won't change anything, as suspicion reveals the truth to him. He sees a world where numbers and data control everything, and people sell their souls for them. So he crushes a stone in his hand, preferring to lose it and continue his search for the Dream Demon. Mino yells that this is why he doesn't seem human to her. Jaewon announces he's leaving her as he can't travel with someone who has a goal like hers. She yells back, saying she hopes to never see him again. As he watches her leave, Jaewon thinks that now she finally looks human. He overhears some men talking and discovers the Dream Demon is with them, but he decides to change his clothes first. Outside, the tavern is quiet and empty. Mino approaches the door and wonders how she ended up back here. She opens the door and apologizes to the lady for being late, but the inside of the tavern is completely trashed, and Mino realizes something terrible has happened. A man with a huge sword comments that he should have stopped her earlier. Lying on the floor, Claire tells him to shut up and says she's going to die because of him now. Janya, the elder of the Golden Sky clan, asks Mino why she's alone and what happened to their deal. She calls him naive and states that Jaewon won't come. She then explains that the reason is simple. He wants to destroy this world. Mino launches an attack with her blades at the men. Janya just smiles and says the witch has lost her mind. He prepares to use his shadow technique and notes that she's only called the Witch of Destruction on the hunting grounds. A shadowy creature appears, and he dares her to summon her beast there. Mino dodges one of the creatures. She hurls her blades at the enemy. Janya wields his sword and prepares to counterattack. With a single strike, he destroys Mino's shadow creatures. The man then advances through the remnants of the shadows. One of his subordinates scoffs, saying she looks more like a stripper than the Witch of Destruction. Janya informs her that the walls are soundproof and orders her to stop fighting and bring Jaewon to them. Mino threatens them, saying they will face the wrath of the Black Forest clan. But he grabs Claire's hair and reveals he knows the clan doesn't have a branch in Gorgon. The young woman prepares an ice sword technique. Her attack, however, is blocked by Janya, who calls it a cute little trick. He swears he'll tear her apart himself. Mino just glares at him and calls him a bastard. One of the goons wonders why this scene seems familiar. In a flashback, a voice asks Jaewon if he would go back in time if there was a way. Mino then laments, wishing she could go back in time. As Janya prepares the final blow, she wonders if she would have seen the end of the world if she had gone with him. Suddenly, a bright light appears behind her. Janya's attack is blocked by a mysterious force. Two of his goons turn around, surprised by the interruption. Jaewon appears and comments that this wasn't how he wanted things to go. Mino asks if he came to save her. She notes that the clothes he gave her didn't fit. One of the men recognizes him as the guy with the fallen soul stones and celebrates not having to look for him anymore. But Jaewon surprises them by asking if they have the Dream Demon. He demands they tell him where the demon is and bring it to him. Janya wonders if the kid has lost his mind, certain he couldn't take on an entire fortress. Warning Mino to be careful, Jaewon says he doesn't think she'll lose. Calling him arrogant, the man leaps forward with his henchmen to teach him a lesson. Without flinching, Jaewon just stares him down, preparing for a fight. With a swift motion, he fires an energy projectile at his enemies. Surprised by the sudden attack, Janya spins around. He quickly realizes the kid managed to dodge it. The men murmur, wondering if he's an Abyss warrior since they thought he wasn't an adapted player. Recalling the past, Jaewon remembers that only a five-horned beast had ever dodged his attack before, but he quickly dismisses the thought, knowing it didn't matter. Suddenly, Mino cries out in pain. Screaming Claire's name, she panics. Seizing the opportunity, Janya grabs her by the hair and threatens to kill her if Jaewon says another word. One of the henchmen tells Claire to shut up and hits her across the face. Yelling for Claire to hang on, Mino asks Jaewon if they can still save her. Puzzled, he wonders why she's even asking, since his only target is the Dream Demon. Grabbing the kid's cape, Mino tells herself that she's human. Amidst flashbacks, she remembers ordinary people living their lives. Then, an intense glow emanates from Jaewon's body. Janya orders his skeletal lackeys to attack. Crying out for help, Claire is turned into a skeleton. With a determined look, Jaewon silently watches the scene unfold. Raising his sword, he summons an intense light. In a devastating blow, he strikes the ground, unleashing a massive explosion of energy. A pillar of light shoots into the sky, tearing through the clouds. The tavern and the entire surrounding area are obliterated by the blast. The beam of light rises in the distance, illuminating the entire city. Startled guards wonder what's happening as they stare at the sky. With a serious expression, Carlton silently observes the scene. He then orders his men to move out. One of Janya's henchmen announces there's a problem. He reports that the soundproof wall has been destroyed and the boss just grunts. As Jawan and Manhwa watch, one of the guards orders them to surround the bar. Arriving with his men, Carlton asks Jawan what is going on. Calmly, the kid remarks that the timing is perfect and accuses the men of violating their precious legal code. Pointing a finger, Jawan accuses them of violating Article 276, Paragraph 4 of Gorgon's Penal Code. He adds that they are part of a conspiracy, but Manhwa cuts him off, saying he's the one trying to destroy the world. In a firm voice, Carlton charges them with illegal destruction of private property and kidnapping a resident, announcing they are under arrest. Recognizing the guard's gesture, Janya orders his men to fall back for now. From the inspector's hands, chains of energy form, and he asks if they really think they can escape. Bound by the chains, the men writhe as Janya curses in anger. Materializing a weapon, Carlton holds it firmly. In a cold tone, he warns them that resistance is futile. Even so, one of the henchmen breaks free and attacks him, but the blow is easily blocked. Amidst the tavern's rubble, Carlton and Janya face off. Their weapons clash in a stalemate of strength and determination. With a precise cut, Carlton's blade cracks the enemy's sword. From behind, Janya charges and yells for him to die. Summoning the chains again, the inspector slams them into the ground. The impact opens a colossal crater in the ground. When the dust settles, a hole in the tavern's ceiling is revealed. One of the henchmen, exhausted, surrenders and admits defeat. Calling him naive, Carlton says it was a wise choice nonetheless. Right after, he throws a spherical object towards the others. Upon hitting the ground, the artifact releases a dense purple smoke. The burst of smoke engulfs the entire area. Startled, one of the men is shocked to realize the boss used the black cloud. He mentions that one of his comrades inhaled the gas, and Janya scolds him for not wearing his mask properly. Suddenly, a mysterious voice expresses surprise that he used the black cloud without the Ark's permission. Seolang Hook, an elder of the Golden Sky clan, asks if the Witch of Destruction is really that strong, recalling he wanted to capture her alive. Janya explains it was because of the silver chains, and Seolang asks if the annoying man is present. Laughing, he celebrates that the stubborn man inhaled the black cloud, claiming it will be a great show. Suddenly, Seolang senses something strange and calls out to Janya. Turning to Jawan, Mino asks who he really is. The kid's sword begins to vibrate, filled with intense energy. With a devastating strike, he dispels the entire black cloud. Stunned, Janya and his henchmen wonder who this kid is and how he survived the deadly smoke. In an astonished tone, the elder states that not even someone from Nakmyeon could pull that off. In silence, Jawan watches the scene beside Mino. Then, he turns to the newcomers and asks if they are also with the other group. Snapping his fingers, he grumbles about how annoying this whole situation is. Ready for battle, Jawan maintains a serious expression. Reluctantly, he uses an item, muttering that he hates relying on them. The power of Garnak manifests, and a monstrous creature appears before the men. Screaming in terror, one of the henchmen asks what that thing is. The beast charges at Jawan, putting him at the center of its attack. The impact of the blow tears through several men, ripping them in half. With steady steps, the kid walks calmly among the fallen bodies. Watching the scene, Seolang wonders if he himself isn't a monster. Ordering them to face him, Janya tries to retreat and escape. He stops, panting, trying to catch his breath. His eyes fall upon the bodies of Jamyong and Janmang. He grinds his teeth, unable to accept that it all ended like this. A voice echoes, saying there is still a way to get out of there alive. Approaching him, Jaewon demands that he reveal where he hid the dream demon. With disdain, Janya replies that telling him will change nothing, as long as they let him go. He explains that once the kid discovers the truth, he will wish he were dead. In silence, Jaewon stares at him, not understanding who he's talking about. Lying on the ground, the man realizes he's doomed and that there's only one way out. Biting a stone of fallen souls, he activates the item he had hidden. Recognizing the object, Jaewon comments that everyone here seems to be addicted to drugs. In a distant memory, Mino says she understands why he thinks that. She explains, however, that those aren't drugs, but the only way to contain spiritual contamination. Janya's body begins to twist and swell grotesquely. His face cracks as the girl says that no one wants to become one of the undead. Transformed into a monstrous creature, he unleashes an overwhelming wave of energy. The ground trembles and screams of terror echo all around. Rising before the terrified civilians, the monster faces its victims. In a brutal charge, it rushes into the crowd. With a devastating blow, it throws several people to the ground. Without mercy, it continues its assault, stabbing and killing helpless civilians. The creature's eye glows brightly in the darkness. Then it realizes the world around it has become a desolate landscape overrun by the undead. Lifting its gaze to an entity in the sky, the monster questions the value of dignity in a world like this. Declaring victory, it claims it can now do whatever it wants. Its red eyes meet a pair of golden eyes staring back from the darkness. The creature spots Jawan, calls him a bastard, and lunges to attack. However, the dark tentacles slice through the air, completely missing their target. Motionless, Jawan stands amidst the attack, untouched. His golden eyes radiate an intense light. In silence, he wonders how humans could even exist in a world like that. The strangeness of the situation makes him analyze the enemy carefully. Even using suspicion, he realizes he can't see the monster's true nature. Still, He decides it doesn't matter and unsheathes his sword. With a steady motion, he points the blade at the creature. He concludes that, in the end, it makes no difference at all. Raising his hand, Jae-won fires a blast of energy. The blast hits the monster square in the face. Thrown backward, the creature's body disintegrates from the impact. Its head falls to the ground completely still. A dark liquid oozes from its remaining eye. In a distant memory, two people run through a snow-covered forest. In the present, Jae-won notices it has started to rain. The raindrops fall on the fallen creature, washing away the blood. Little by little, the monster's body turns to dust and disappears. Sheathing his sword, he wonders what that creature really was. With steady steps, he walks on through the rain, believing someone from the bar might know the dream demon's whereabouts. Alone, he walks among the wreckage as the storm follows him. One of the guards warns him not to get closer, but Jae-won can see that Mino is still sick. Suddenly, another soldier runs toward him, calling for Inspector Javier. Amidst the rubble, a man finds Carlton on the ground and orders the castle alarm to be sounded. Gripping her shoulder tightly, Jae-won tries to restrain her. In a weak voice, Mino asks him to put an end to her suffering. She begs him to do it while she can still remain herself. He wraps his arms around her, reminding himself that this woman is human. The image of her smile flashes through his mind, and he doesn't understand why his suspicion falters. He also doesn't understand why oblivion vanishes whenever he's near her. Even so, his hand reaches for the hilt of his sword. He tells himself there's no room for emotions on his journey and that he won't hesitate. But Claire intervenes, shouting for him to wait. She says it might not be too late and that they need to get her to the hospital. Almost in tears, she begs him to wait just a little longer. Under makeshift white tents, guards watch over a makeshift building. Claire asks if Mino will survive, and a voice replies that there's no hope if the transformation continues. Just then, Jae-won hears an alarm echoing throughout the city. A level 4 alert is issued in Gorgon, warning of hostile creatures appearing in the castle. Amid the panic, people run desperately as they are instructed to evacuate immediately. A man approaches a guard and asks where they should go. Suddenly, the soldier's body begins to swell, deforming into something monstrous. Black tentacles erupt from his body and lunge at the civilian. Completely transformed, the guard becomes a creature covered in tentacles. From the monster's body, small winged creatures emerge in swarms. In another part of the city, warriors fight bravely against the aberrations amidst the chaos. A man with long hair and a massive blade watches the battle from a distance. Claire approaches Jae-won and asks if he's the man Mino was talking about. She accuses him of ignoring the rules of this world and judging who is human and who is not. But he replies that he knows people like her well as he has met some before. Gently, Claire touches Mino's head and says that people didn't adapt out of ignorance, but out of a lack of choice. Jae-won corrects her, stating that what they lack is courage. Intrigued, Claire asks what kind of courage that would be. He explains it's the courage to seek higher ideals and a greater justice, and she concludes that this is what he seeks. Admitting she isn't brave enough to understand, Claire still says she knows one thing. Claire states that this is precisely what makes him dangerous. She confesses that although she wishes he wouldn't leave, he needs to go. The tavern keeper explains that his mere presence gives people hope, but warns that the longer he stays, the more miserable everyone will become. In the midst of her pain, Claire grits her teeth and yells that she can't stand people like him. Mino, still weak, opens her eyes and with a faint smile asks him not to give up on this world. Jae-won then turns and asks one of the guards how much medicine is left. The man replies that they use most of it to stabilize the castle lord and the rest is not enough. Hearing this, Jae-won orders them to gather all the available medicine. As he watches the preparation, he sees a beast's horn being ground in a mortar and realizes what the substance is for. Soon, Carlton's body begins to convulse, and a guard shouts for him to resist, as not even a 3-horned beast can purify him. Jae-won asks if there isn't a way to reverse the transformation. The captain glares at him and retorts, asking if he thinks they'd be doing this if they knew the answer. Frustrated, the young man grabs the man's collar. He then touches Carlton's face to try and wake him, and the captain scolds him for his insolence. Even so, the man just grumbles as he watches the scene. Carlton regains consciousness, and upon seeing Jae-won, grips his hand tightly. In a trembling voice, he begs him to end his condition, saying that only he can do it. Confused, Jae-won questions the request, and Carlton cites the article in Gorgon's law which decrees that anyone whose soul begins to corrupt must be neutralized. He just watches him in silence, admiring his loyalty to the very end. Then, he mutters that if he had more people like him by his side, he wouldn't have been trapped in that tower for 40 years. An alarm interrupts the moment, announcing that Carlton's spiritual contamination level has reached 94%. The system warns that he will soon transform as his skin begins to distort. Suddenly, a firm voice orders everyone to stand back. A man in golden armor appears, Jaher, captain of the eradication unit. His presence leaves the captain of the guard stunned. Jaher then rests his hand on the hilt of his weapon and recites Article 1, Paragraph 4 of Gorgon's special law. With a resolute gaze, he declares that according to the law, he must immediately eliminate Inspector Carlton Javier. So Jaher raises his sword to stop the doomed Carlton Javier, but a firm hand grabs the blade, stopping the decisive blow. This act leaves the captain completely stunned. The intruder claims the prisoner can't be defeated, as there are still questions to be asked. Jaher, impressed, questions who this man could be to have blocked his sword with his bare hands. He justifies his action by saying the inspector will become a dangerous 5th stage being. The stranger simply asks if he's really seeing him transform. Soon after, he shows a Garnak horn and suggests using it, filling one of the officers with hope. But the mysterious man crushes the valuable item in his hand, leaving the soldier shocked by his action. The horn's powder is sprinkled over the inspector and Mino, causing the contamination on their skin to stop spreading. Relieved, James notices that his subordinate Javier's contamination meter has stopped rising. Another guard, however, is alarmed by the woman's condition. He shouts her name, warning that her body is too weak to stop the transformation. Then, an alarm sounds, warning that the contamination has surpassed 95% and can no longer be stopped. The woman grabs Jahir, screaming, demanding they call Cheonghyo to use the corruption cut. The stranger hears it explained that this attack directly stops the contamination. Naven is held back by guards and says the doctor is too busy at the castle to be summoned for just this. Jahir turns to the other man, states there's no choice and orders him to step aside. The young man just stares back at him with a firm gaze. He then slowly places his hand on his own sword. Jahir notices the movement, but the stranger says he will neutralize the girl himself. He then draws his blade and points it at Mino, arousing everyone's suspicion. Naven panics and screams for him to stop what he's doing immediately. Finally, an intense energy emanates from the sword and envelops Mino's body. As Jawan concentrates, energy flows intensely through his body. He channels the power into the sword with a firm grip. Soon, a pool of light forms on the ground and begins to bubble. Suddenly, a wave of energy explodes, catching him by surprise. In an instant, he finds himself transported to an empty, unknown space. Confused, a young man wonders where he has ended up. Then, an old man in a hat approaches Mino and laments her current state. He extends his hand to the young woman's face, promising to help the poor child. Suddenly, the elder raises his gaze, suspicious. He shouts, asking who this intruder is and what they are doing in his world. The old man watches him intently, analyzing every detail of his presence. He then questions him, asking why a noble soul emits such insignificant energy. The warrior realizes his suspicion ability has no effect on the man. He then concludes that the elder is the source of the contamination, and that defeating him might save Mino. Without hesitation, he rushes forward and unleashes a powerful energy strike. Surprised, the young man watches the elder block the blade. He asks how he managed to stop such a simple attack. The elder's sword begins to crack under the force of the impact. Then, the weapon shatters into several pieces. In the real world, Jahir and the others watch the released energy in astonishment. Furious, the old man breaks the remains of his sword and roars, demanding to know who dares invade his domain. He stares at the fragments of the blade on the ground, and laments the loss of his precious four-horned beast blade. In an accusatory tone, the elder blames him for destroying his weapon, but the other retorts that he broke it himself. The scene then reveals the old man sitting on the bed, introducing himself as Cheonghyo, the Doctor of Perdition. Jahir, astonished, asks what he's doing there. The doctor replies that he couldn't let someone so beautiful be defeated. The answer leaves the captain completely speechless and confused. Cheonghyo turns to the young man and scolds him for ruining the corruption cut by breaking the necessary sword, but his gaze soon shifts to the new blade, which glows intensely with power. Enchanted, he approaches and praises the weapon, noting that its sheath is made from the horn of a five-horned beast. When he tries to touch it, the young man firmly grabs his hand and stops him. Then he asks if it's possible to save her by using that sword. With a slight smile, the doctor replies that of course it is. Without hesitation, the warrior hands over the blade. His trust in a complete stranger surprises everyone. One of the onlookers remarks that he must have great faith in his own abilities. Cheonghyo wields the sword and comments on the unusual energy emanating from it, as well as from its owner. Jahir and the others watch the scene, stunned. A powerful energy begins to completely envelop the doctor's body. He brandishes the blade, leaving a trail of dark energy in the air. Finally, Cheonghyo prepares to strike, declaring he will show them what he's capable of. As a pool of light appears, Jawan wonders if it's the same spell as before. He watches the energy closely and soon concludes it's not. Cheonghyo remarks that it resembles his suspicion skill and asks the young man to wait a moment. Then, the young man realizes he's seeing the world through the old man's eyes. He quickly notices the weakened state of the aged body. Worried, he asks if Cheonghyo is alright. The old man complains he doesn't have enough mana because of the castle's lord. Suddenly, the space around them begins to shake violently. Cheonghyo watches his drawing fall apart and mourns the loss. Lying on the ground, he apologizes for the embarrassing situation. The warrior grabs his sword, leaving the old man completely surprised. The doctor calls him a fool for trying to copy the undead Slash without understanding this world. The young man replies that he's not good with slashes, but he tightens his grip on the hilt, saying that even an imitation will do. Cheonghyo yells for him to stop, warning that the undead Slash is no ordinary technique. Claire glares at him and states that he's not brave, just reckless. She remarks that she can't stand people like him, but the swordsman just tells her to shut up. A dense energy envelops his hand as he declares it's the first time in his life that he's drawing his sword not to fight, but to save someone. The doctor watches him, shocked, and says that it can't be true. Amidst the tension, he tries to remember what she looked like. The tip of the blade touches the ground as the memory surfaces in his mind. Then the young man swings the sword in a swift motion. He remembers Mino as a stubborn but kind-hearted warrior, and he also recalls that she was someone incapable of betraying others. Afterward, he stands up and feels that something is still missing. He looks to the side with an expression of sudden realization. With the tip of his sword, he draws cat ears on the ground. He completes the drawing of Soil, remembering her trust in people and thankful that he recalled her beauty mark. An intense light begins to shine from under Mino's bed. Back in the real world, Jaewon reappears beside her as the light fades. Mino slowly opens her eyes and gives a gentle smile. A guard announces that the contamination level is dropping, leaving Jaehae and Cheonghyo in disbelief. The swordsman asks if she's okay, while Claire cries with relief in the background. Cheonghyo approaches and asks who he is, noticing that his energy has diminished. Next, he asks where he learned to perform the undead stab. Jaehae, surprised, turns to the doctor and wants to know if the technique used was really the same as the undead slash. Cheonghyo confirms that it was, though he hates to admit it. Jaehae states that such a technique is not a skill, which means that Jaewon. It's soon revealed that he must be an awakened, just like Jaehae himself. It's explained that the Awakened are people unaffected by the system's rules, individuals who gain power by refusing to adapt. They are strong enough to upset the balance of power and chaos, and there are very few of them in the entire Great Realm. The captain understands how the young man managed to use the technique, but Cheonghyo warns him, saying they still know nothing about the boy. Even so, Jaehae reminds the doctor that he himself mentioned they could save the castle's lord if they found someone else who could use the slash. He insists that nothing is more important than the sovereign's life. Suddenly, Cape flutters in the entrance, announcing a new arrival. A firm voice declares they have permission from the council and orders everyone to stand back, leaving Jaehae surprised. Then, a man in dark robes appears, revealing himself as the captain of the Dark Soul unit. He is introduced as a 5th stage player and the Prime Minister's guardian. Jaehae questions his presence, since his unit doesn't usually deal with the undead. However, the captain kneels before the swordsman and greets him as a messenger from the Nakmyeon clan. He invites him to the castle, leaving Jaehae and Cheonghyo completely baffled by the situation. Meanwhile, Jaewon wonders if the man is really telling the truth about the Nakmyeon clan. Soon, the scene shifts to a large castle bathed in sunlight. A man greets him, saying it's a pleasure to finally meet him. Lacing his fingers together, he offers to introduce himself before getting down to business. He reveals his name, Jurgen Cheever, the Prime Minister of the Gorgon Fortress. The visitor introduces himself simply, and Jurgen comments that he's as quiet as Dr. Cheonghyo had described. Next, the minister asks directly if he is truly a messenger from the Nakmyeon clan. The negative answer surprises the captain of the Dark Soul unit, though Jurgen seems to understand. Cheonghyo interrupts and explains that the stones the young man possesses are proof of clan affiliation, questioning how he got them. Holding one of the stones, the warrior claims he found them and asks what happened to their owners. Jurgen coldly replies that they are gone, shocking Jaehae, who wonders what could have happened to members of such a powerful family. Then, Jaewon coldly states that he defeated them himself, making the captain leap from his chair in anger. Jurgen urges for calm and says he's sure the young man had his reasons, leaving the others speechless. The swordsman explains that he was attacked first as they wanted to steal his horn, and that he merely defended himself. The minister reflects that the Nakmyeon clan has always been greedy and understands what happened. Finally, he turns to the young man and asks him to tell him more about what he's been doing since he entered Chaos. The young man just listens to the recap of events, his gaze firm. Jurgen continues, stating that he managed to copy the doctor's technique after seeing it only once. Jaewon nods and says he understands. Cheonghyo, in disbelief, asks if the Prime Minister really believes that unlikely story. With a slight smile, Jurgen explains to the doctor that to earn someone's trust, you must first trust them. He then asks the swordsman for permission to ask a few more questions, and the young man agrees. The minister stares at him with a serious and curious expression. Then he asks if his physical body is still alive right now. The sudden question leaves him completely surprised. He explains that when he neutralized the Tower of Nightmares, he was still a spirit, and perhaps the Tree of Illusion sent him to Chaos by mistake. He concludes that his physical body is likely still alive on Earth. Right after, he asks Jurgen how he knew he hadn't died. The Prime Minister replies that it was because of how he described his arrival in Chaos as an event beyond his control. Jurgen adds that no one in that world describes their own end that way. He then asks if he hesitates to reveal his identity out of fear of someone, to which the young man replies, maybe, maybe not. The minister, in turn, reveals he has an apology to make. He confesses that his men have been watching him for the last 4 days, and the young man confirms he knew about the man on the roof. Jurgen admits he's more skilled than he imagined, but reveals he has discovered a few things. He slides his finger across an information panel. Several reports appear describing his feats and classifying him as an SS-level danger target with unknown power. The minister looks at him and asks if he knows what they call someone like that. Cheonggyo immediately shouts that he's reckless, while Jaher shows confusion about his true nature. Jurgen, however, states that some call him a hero and others reckless, but he declares that he prefers to call people like him protagonists. The young man is confused by the term, and the minister explains that protagonists are usually famous. Extending his hand, he comments that since Jaewon isn't well known, someone is preventing information about him from spreading. Jurgen also notes that if the young man had support, he wouldn't have faced so much difficulty entering the fortress, which surprises him. Finally, the Prime Minister concludes that he is a protagonist who has fled to chaos and is being sought by powerful people. The swordsman then seriously wonders who could be after him. He reflects on whether his pursuer could be the Master of Darkness, recalling an old message. Finally, he thinks about how powerful the 12 Masters of the Great Realm must be. Meanwhile, Jurgen offers the protection of Gorgon Fortress, without asking for his identity or payment for the damages. Curious, the young man asks if the fortress is strong enough to face the 12 Masters. The Prime Minister asks if they are the ones pursuing him, and he confirms it might be one of them. Jurgen leans in and says that's even better, as the Masters cannot get directly involved in the affairs of chaos. The young man leans forward and asks what he wants in return. The minister only asks for the favor of saving the lord of the castle. 2 hours later, a torch illuminates a stone corridor. A guide informs them that the inspector and the woman are recovering in the medical room. She then asks if he is sure he wants to go to the training grounds instead of the VIP suite. Cheonggyo challenges him to a fight to decide which technique is stronger, and he agrees. The old man suddenly asks if he has also completed the Emperor's Tower, which surprises him. Cheonggyo states with certainty that he knows something. They then arrive at a large, ornate door. The elder challenges him, promising to tell him everything he knows if he can win. But he adds that such a feat is likely impossible. A brazier of fire swings on chains, illuminating the training arena. The young man then moves swiftly, leaving only a blur behind. The old man, lying in a crater, calls for him to continue. He approaches and invites him to fight once more. His gaze sweeps across the room, observing the damage. Then, he states that the fight is already over. Cheonggyo insists he hasn't used his final blow yet, and the young man reflects that he keeps repeating that. The old man calls him a rude boy and asks his age. The young man replies that he's probably around 60 years old. Indignant, Cheonggyo leaps from the crater and shouts that he is 1,000 years old and that 60 years of practice is nothing. He asks if the elder really practiced his techniques for 1,000 years, and Cheonggyo proudly confirms it. The young man then turns and says it looks like he's barely practiced for 10 years. The old man's hand clenches tightly, shattering the surrounding stones. Cheonggyo strikes the ground with a powerful attack. Annoyed, he calls his opponent Kid and lunges through the air again. The elder raises his sword and challenges him, saying he wants to see his reaction after this attack. A large amount of energy emanates from his weapon in a swift motion. The energy takes the form of a bestial creature and charges forward fiercely. The young man just braces for impact, clenching his fist tightly. He stares down the immense energy creature as it approaches to attack him, and then Jaewon unleashes a wave of energy that expands and nullifies the creature's attack. As the power pulses intensely in his fist, he focuses completely. The impact of the collision drags him back, leaving deep marks on the ground. On the other side, Cheonggyo lands and congratulates him, saying it wasn't bad at all. Despite this, the young man wonders how that old man can be so strong, having used only a normal strike. The elder praises him for the technique and asks for its name. Firmly, he replies that it's called a normal strike, which the other finds arrogant, implying there's an even more powerful technique. Confirming his words, the warrior extends his hand toward him. In that instant, an intense aura envelops him as he invites the other to watch. The display of power leaves Cheonggyo completely shocked and speechless. His eyes widen in recognition and surprise. Suddenly, a memory of the solitary king of chaos flashes in his mind. He recalls how he could have forgotten that overwhelming power. The memory of the fear of facing him resurfaces vividly. Although he realizes the technique is inferior to the king's, the elder wonders if he could contain it. Then, a vision of the Gorgon fortress being completely destroyed terrifies him. Amidst the intense aura, the warrior leans forward and announces he's coming. Desperate, the old man yells for him to wait a moment. Finally, Cheonggyo surrenders in a panic, declaring that he has won and giving up the fight. Soon after, the scene changes to an immense industrial city that trembles among great gears. The place is introduced as the 5th zone of the Great Kingdom, known as the Steel Zone. From inside a building, a powerful voice demands the information be repeated. The subordinate reports that the Master of Darkness is in contact with Chaos. Hoyu, the Master of Steel, questions why he would be involved with Chaos. He remembers the agreement among the Masters not to interfere in the affairs of that domain. Trembling, the subordinate states the situation is quite complicated. He offers to show a recording, displays an image of Jaewon in action. Hoyu recognizes the video of the solo clear of the 99th floor and dismisses it as fake. However, the guard reveals that the product in the video belonged to the Master of Darkness, which shocks him deeply. Then, the commander demands to know where the product is now, and the subordinate hesitates to answer. He explains that after refusing to complete the tutorial, the man broke through the tower's ceiling and escaped into chaos. A system alert announces the end of the tutorial game, and the guard wonders how he did that under the observation of the 100th floor cultivator. He then reveals that Jaewon defeated the cultivator leaving Haoyu completely stunned by the news. The Master of Steel questions if the people from the 9th Zone have connections in Chaos, but the guard says the Master of Darkness insists it's true. Finally, the subordinate admits he just found out this information. He reveals that the Master of Darkness has been interfering in Chaos for a long time. Furthermore, several of the 10 areas of Chaos have been in contact with him throughout this period. Haoyu becomes thoughtful, trying to understand what the Master of Darkness is plotting. Then he orders a letter to be sent to Chaos, announcing his visit, which startles the subordinate. The Master of Steel clarifies that he is just going to observe the situation and asks for 10 elite guards, leaving the guard relieved he wasn't scolded. Soon after, he taps his fingers on the table, reflecting on what is happening in Chaos. Then, he wonders how Cheonggyo is doing and hopes the old man is behaving himself over there. Back in the arena, the elder desperately shouts for his opponent to stop. Jaewon stops him with his sword, demanding respect for his elders, and then lets him go. Fallen on the ground, the man questions how he learned that technique, having practiced for only 40 years. Casually, the warrior explains he practiced the strike 10 billion times, which the other finds absurd. He then asks if the old man thinks he can only use that attack with his sword. Suddenly, small bursts of energy erupt from his hands. Stunned, Cheonggyo realizes he felt something different about him from the start. He understands it's not just about aura or presence. The old man comprehends that when Jaewon executes the strike, it's as if he reaches out his hand and touches the world with a deep aversion for its existence. In that instant, the elder realizes in disbelief that the young man has become the very personification of the strike and is constantly confronting the world. He watches him, completely shocked and defeated. Calmly, Jaewon just repeats that he has already performed 10 billion strikes. Soon after, he shows the elder a scroll. He reminds him of the oath they signed, in which the loser must grant the winner a wish. As he reads the oath aloud, the old man, irritated, shouts that it's fine and he'll do it. Fearfully, he worries he'll be turned into a servant, but Jaewon denies it. His demand is simple. He just wants the other to answer his questions honestly. Then, he invites him to walk outside under the starry sky of the fortress. As they walk, he asks what a specialist-level tower is, and Cheonggyo begins by explaining they are created by dream demons. He reveals that although the towers are ranked, certain master-level demons create their own, known as specialist towers. Jaewon then questions why they would create towers with no relation to cultivation. Cheonggyo explains that these beings study the nature of the world, and that those who complete their towers become awakened. The elder asks him if he also completed a specialist tower and confirms he is from the 4th Tower, Melville. He then describes the structure known as Moby Dick. There you had to face a giant white whale right on the first floor, keeping everyone on constant alert. He admits that at the time, the tower seemed almost impossible to overcome. He recalls that countless great warriors fell in that place. The old man states it was practically a miracle he managed to clear the tower. He flinches as he relives the terrible experience of that challenge. Then the elder approaches and asks which tower the other came from, and Jaewon replies that the demon's name was Mulak. The name makes Cheonggyo turn around in complete shock. Surprised, he says he never thought he'd meet an awakened who cleared Mulak's tower, and the warrior asks if he knows him. Cheonggyo confirms that he does and reveals they used to be part of the same team. Jaewon just listens to the revelation in silence. Jaewon repeats the statement, questioning if he and Mulak were really on the same team. Cheonggyo replies that it's a long story. He then suggests they take a walk to talk more calmly. The scene shifts to a festive, brightly lit street at night. They find several people sitting at tables, drinking and chatting happily. A man serves a skewer of one-horned beast at one of the tables. Cheonggyo approaches and asks the vendor if he's now running an outdoor food stall. Another man serves 2 mugs of beer and complains that a certain someone destroyed his bar. Jaewon remarks on how quickly he opened a new business and tells the old man to just drink. The food and drinks are left on the table for them. As he watches the people passing by, the warrior comments that something doesn't feel right. He continues to silently analyze the behavior of the passersby. Cheonggyo sips his beer and guesses the other is wondering about the food in a world where no one feels hunger. He pauses and stares at his drink with a serious look. Then he states that Chaos used to be a wonderful place. He explains that Chaos was a sweet refuge for souls exhausted from the war in the Great Realm. He tells of how warriors laid down their arms and troubadours composed songs of peace. Suddenly, a shout catches Jaewon's attention. The old man points to a fight and asks what he thinks it looks like. Jaewon takes a sip and replies that it looks like a typical drunk guy, but he is soon surprised to find the drink tastes like pure water. Cheonggyo confirms the man isn't drunk, as people in Chaos don't feel hunger, don't age, and don't get drunk. He explains that because they miss their real lives, they end up mimicking their old behaviors. The old man describes the life they all long for, with a living body and a heart that still beats. Then he slams the table and reveals that one day, people emerged with the dream of reclaiming their past lives. Right after, he stomps his foot hard on the ground and says they were known as the Abyss Expedition. Jaewon questions why they would go to a place like the Abyss. Cheonggyo replies they did it to find the fruit of rebirth and calls him annoying for asking so much. He finishes by explaining that the fruit grows on the Tree of Illusion at the edge of the Abyss. Jaewon asks if the fruit of rebirth can really revive the dead. With a serious look, Cheonggyo confirms that it can. He explains that the only way for the dead to return to life is by eating the fruit. The Abyss expedition then was formed to pursue this goal. The old man recalls that at the time he was an awakened of only 150 years and feared nothing. Jaewan then asks if Mulak also participated in the expedition. Cheonggyo confirms he did and reveals that Mulak was the one who led the expedition. He describes him as a very unusual fellow. The scene shows an insect resting on bamboo amidst a silent forest. In a memory, Mulak observes Jaewan and calls him an interesting awakened. He comments that the young man is only partially awakened and has chosen an unusual path. Mulak warns him that it will be a difficult journey, but the young man just tells him to save his words. The demon notices that Jaewan shows irritation at the idea of cultivation. Then the warrior shatters his own sword with a powerful blow. Right after, he asks why a dream demon would go to the Abyss, since they spend their days just creating towers. Mulak, still in the memory, admits he can't deny the accusation, but says an apology wouldn't do any good. He states that he will have to carry this guilt for the rest of his life, leaving the young man thoughtful. He then begins to explain why he entered the Tree of Illusion. Cheonggyo, in the same memory, hears in shock that the reason was Mulak's own tower. The demon then declares he went there to put an end to all cultivation. That's why he decided to join the expedition. Back in the present, Jaewan reflects on his wish and asks if the expedition was successful. Cheonggyo explains that he got separated from the group, but he saw Mulak reach the top of the Tree of Illusion. He says the fruits began to fall, and thanks to that, every member of the expedition got one. The warrior then questions why the old man is still in chaos if he got the fruit and accuses him of lying. But the vendor intervenes, stating the expedition failed, which angers Cheonggyo. Jaewan confirms that everyone managed to get the fruit. However, the old man reveals that at the entrance to chaos, those scumbags were waiting for them. He's referring to the masters and heads of the Great Realm's families. Cheonggyo explains that, unlike the lords who went with the expedition, these cowards didn't have the courage to enter the Abyss. He continues, saying they weren't strong enough to defeat them. He further explains that their enemies were on a completely different level, and in the end, they lost the fruit. Angrily, the old man slams the table and reveals that, for the past 900 years, the masters have been using the fruit to continuously revive themselves. He states that the masters and lords of the 5 families have priority in resurrection. Jaewan then finally understands why everyone in chaos seems so hopeless. That's why he realizes everyone knows they will never reach the real life they desire, nor will they obtain the fruit. Soon, the young man tries to ask more about Mulak, but finds Cheonggyo fast asleep on the table. Meanwhile, the vendor tells him not to bother, stating that the old man is truly drunk, which leaves Jaewan confused. Then, he reveals that since the end of the expedition, no one has seen that dream demon again. The man recalls Mulak's last words, saying he had failed, but at the same time succeeded, and the young man turns to listen. Next, James approaches and thanks him for his help, stating that Inspector Javier would have been in danger without his intervention. At that moment, Jaewan asks if he's already forgotten him, and the guard invites him to visit Gorgon from the north in the future. With a wink, James promises to keep the visit a secret from the inspector. Right after, he and the other guards leave the area. The young man just watches the group leave in silence. Suddenly, someone comes running towards them, shouting for the doctor. The man hurriedly approaches the table where Jaewan is. Immediately, the young man recognizes him as Captain Jahir, who arrives out of breath. Then, he urgently announces that there's trouble. Jaewan then asks what that energy coming from the night sky is. As they run across the rooftops, Jahir explains that it's what's happening to the castle lord. He then deduces the lord is undergoing a transformation. He feels the spiritual pressure, much more intense than before, coming from the castle's basement. Even so, he keeps running with a firm and determined gaze. At that moment, Jahir pleads with him, asking him to save the castle lord in exchange for Gorgon's protection. He confirms that the lord is indeed transforming. He then explains that although this happens once a week, on this particular day, he suddenly went into a rage. The captain also reveals that the lord was a living legend before the transformation began. He adds that he and Dr. Cheonggyo are the only survivors of the Abyss expedition. Jahir then asks if the young man knows how to use the special technique, since the doctor is unavailable, but he says no. The young man admits he can only imitate it and is still far from Cheonggyo's level. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake, and Jahir wonders if it has already started. A colossal energy explodes from the castle tower as the captain shouts for the lord. He shields himself from a gust of wind and limits the situation. Then, he notices something ahead and tells them to wait a moment. 2 captains block their path and one greets him. Jahir asks why they aren't guarding the castle. He demands they get out of the way, stating they're in a hurry for a reason they already know. But one of the captains refuses, saying he has his own orders, and Jahir questions him. Then he asks if they are defying the heavens. The captain repeats the phrase and reveals a purple emblem on his chest. The 2 declare that the only heaven they obey is the Golden Heaven. One of the warriors leaps to attack, catching Jahir by surprise. The young man shouts for him to watch out and shoves him away. The blow hits the ground, creating an explosion of debris. Jahir lands and blocks the second warrior's attack. He finds the defense impressive. The captain remarks that he didn't know about the Golden Heaven clan's influence in the castle, while his enemy calls him insolent. The other warrior warns them not to think they're the same as before. Jahir defends himself from another powerful sword strike. He warns them to think carefully, stating that the Lord will forgive them if they swear loyalty again, but the spear warrior interrupts him and kneels. He asks if Jair is referring to that figure contained in the basement. The man states that the Lord no longer has control of his power, nor can he distinguish right from wrong. He concludes by saying that this is no longer the Lord they once served. Then he stands up and asks if Captain Jair is still loyal to that creature. With conviction, the captain replies that he has faith his lord will return. The hammer warrior prepares to attack. He calls Jair a lost cause and unleashes a powerful blow. The captain swiftly dodges the attack. The hammer's impact completely shatters the ground. The captain then states they wouldn't have to fight if Jair were a little smarter. He then lands on the rubble, affirming his own words. Meanwhile, Captain Jair is on the ground amidst the debris. He coughs, realizing that for some reason he can't defeat the two opponents. He recognizes he can't predict their speed or strength, understanding it's not a simple level increase. He concludes that they have both transformed and the situation is extremely dangerous. Suddenly, Jawan grabs Cheonghyo and warns him to get away just as the doctor is struck. He then leaps away, carrying his companion. Jawan lands with him and comments that was for pushing him earlier. He then turns to face the two opposing captains. One of them asks if he's the one who knows the special technique, and the young man simply dares him. The warrior sizes him up, doubting his strength and thinking he couldn't even land a decent blow. Then he repeats the word blow with a surprised expression, but Jawan appears before him in an instant, asking if this is what he meant. The two captains are completely shocked by his speed. Immediately after, the young man lands a direct hit on his opponent. The warrior is thrown backward and the impact damages the ground. The other captain, startled, asks if he belongs to the guard unit. Without answering, Jaewon charges at the remaining warrior, who readies himself for battle. He then advises him to learn how to defend himself first. Then he shatters the spear with a single devastating blow. His opponent quickly retreats to create distance. He then counterattacks with the remaining shaft of the weapon. The warrior unleashes a flurry of attacks, calling him weak, while Jaewon notices his energy growing. He questions the source of that power, but concludes it's not driven by negative emotion. The warrior, his mask cracked, asks if someone like him really thinks he can save the Lord. Jaewon calls him naive and states that he's not the one who saves people. He says that's Dr. Cheonghyo's role. However, he leaps onto his opponent's spear. Jair and the doctor just watch the scene in silence. The young man launches himself into the air, positioning himself above the warrior. Then he declares that it's a different story when it comes to neutralizing a threat. Meanwhile, a dark energy begins to emanate from a hallway in the castle's basement. There, Jurgen Cheever and another man watch the scene with apprehension. Cheever mentions it's only been a day since the cut was used. In the past, the Lord would thrash within the energy, confused about what was happening. However, Dr. Cheonghyo's visit had slowed the transformation and weakened the Lord's energy. Now, Jurgen wonders why he's gone mad again, since they were only a month away from curing him. In another memory, Cheonghyo explains that Jawan isn't ready and that the Lord is resisting through sheer willpower. He also believes the young warrior's cut might be strong enough in a month and suggests they try it together. Jair then looks at Jawan, thinking that knowing him, it just might be possible. Back in the basement, the mage grinds his teeth as he connects the dots. He realizes some people knew about Jawan and regrets that there has been a traitor among them ever since. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a man reports that people capable of handling spiritual contamination have appeared. His master, in turn, smiles and says he will see them personally. Surprised, Jurgen warns him that anything involving spiritual contamination is dangerous, but the master just laughs and asks him to have a little more faith. He then reminds him of who he is, a survivor of the war, and he states that although they lost, his duty is to continue protecting the people of Gorgon. The castle lord then appears in his current state. He had gone to inspect the outer castle. However, his spirit was suddenly contaminated, and he had to be carried back. At that moment, Jurgen recalls that someone was with the Lord the entire time. Then, he glances to the side with a serious expression. Soon, an older man asks if Mayhen did something to him, and warns them to prepare for a critical moment. However, one of them argues that it's too dangerous, and they should wait for the doctor, but the other says Gorgon will be lost if they wait. The man then confronts him, saying they can't use the undead cut without the doctor, and questions him. The elder replies that not even all of them together could defeat him, and the other asks what the plan is. At that moment, he announces they will create an undead seal, leaving Jurgen shocked. Still, the mage refuses, but the other insists it will be too late and that they must at least preserve the Lord's mana. Then the subordinate reminds him they don't have a Fallen Soul's stone for the seal and calls him Prime Minister. The Prime Minister replies that he knows all about the stone and tells him to stop pretending. Suddenly, a dark figure emerges in the hallway, and he says that he has finally appeared. Soon, a masked man reveals himself, and Jurgen recognizes him as the captain of the Dark Soul unit, and so he despairs upon realizing he has been betrayed by the Prime Minister's office. Meanwhile, the captain holds a box containing Jawan's Fallen Soul's stone. The Prime Minister then declares that Gorgon's future is at stake and asks why the stone was hidden. Jurgen then reminds him that he knows what would happen if the Lord became an undead. He then accuses him of wanting to turn the Castle Lord into one. He also reminds him that he himself saw the threat a single medium-sized undead posed to Gorgon. He describes it as a natural disaster and asks if that's what he really wants. Still, The mage admits the Lord is enraged and the doctor isn't present. He agrees the situation is delicate, but remains hesitant. He then argues that only people from the Nakmyeon clan can create an undead seal, and it's too late to summon them. However, the Prime Minister tells him not to worry about that. He then reveals that he found people who learned the skill as hooded figures approach. The mage notes they don't belong to the Nakmyeon clan, but the Prime Minister assures him they can create the seal. Then the figures begin a ritual, and he realizes something is wrong. He immediately understands that if they create the undead seal now, all of the castle lord's mana will flow directly into the stone. And he remembers that whoever possesses the stone will inherit that mana and become the new Lord of Gorgon. Because of this, he worries the kingdom might fall into the wrong hands. Then one of the hooded figures picks up the stone, and the mage is stunned, as he believed only the Nakmyeon clan could do so. He then recalls the warning about the appearance of people capable of handling spiritual contamination. Terrified, he understands it must be them. At that moment, the Prime Minister observes the energy and wonders if Minister Maihan planned all of this. Jurgen then turns and orders the guards to arrest the minister at once, but he falters when he notices no one is obeying his order. The surrounding guards just stare at him in complete silence. And that's when he finally understands what's happening. Fallen to the floor, he concludes that they are all in on it. As the figure approaches with the stone, the mage realizes there's nothing he can do. Finally, he just apologizes to his lord. Soon after, the hooded figures begin the ritual, channeling energy toward the castle lord. He laments that through his own complacency, he failed to protect Gorgon. Then he falls to his knees apologizing, and overcome with guilt, he weeps and repeats his apology. Suddenly, the basement ceiling explodes. A huge explosion of energy erupted. Debris flies and one of the cell gates crashes down. Meanwhile, the entire castle begins to shake from the impact. On the ground, one of the men coughs and asks what happened. Soon, everyone gets up and the Prime Minister asks who did that. At that moment, Jurgen looks up and notices something. The captain of the Dark Soul unit reacts with surprise. Finally, Jawan and Jaher emerge from the rubble, and the mage shouts his ally's name. Then he faces his enemies with a serious expression. So Jawan and Jaher face the group of traitors amidst the basement's wreckage. The Prime Minister shouts, demanding to know who they are and calling them insolent. But Jaher tells him to stop pretending, revealing him as Minister Maihan. Meanwhile, the captain of the Shadow Soul unit throws Jurgen to the floor at the minister's feet. Jaher then reveals they already know about the betrayal, as the two defeated captains told them everything. The traitor, filled with fury, glares at the fallen captain. The warrior in the cracked mask can only apologize. Suddenly, the captain falls to the ground, neutralized in an instant. Jaher shouts in surprise, questioning what the minister thinks he's doing. However, he claims the captains fell on their own once their treason was exposed and that he can't be blamed for it. In response, Jaher grabs him by the collar and shouts for everyone to wake up, calling it treason of the highest order. He then looks around as his sword begins to glow intensely. But two guards surround him, aiming their blades at him and apologizing. They order him to remain quiet until the seal is complete, stating they won't let him defy the minister and the clan. Jae-won, watching everything unfold, calls them cowardly traitors. He then turns to Jurgen and says their deal wasn't fair since Gorgon can't protect him now. So he announces he's changing the terms of the deal, leaving the mage surprised. He offers to save the castle lord and eliminate all the traitors present. In return, he points to Changgyo and reveals that he wants the old doctor. He then declares he will create another Abyss expedition, and he states that to do so, he'll need everyone's help. The Prime Minister, annoyed, interrupts him and asks what he's talking about. But Jaewon replies that he heard the minister defeated Janya in a single blow, and now he believes it's true. He stares at him with determination and says that, in that case, the Prime Minister declares they'll have to fight with everything they've got. Immediately, he charges forward to attack with his followers. The two factions clash in a great battle in the basement. At that moment, Jaewon unleashes a powerful slash of energy at his enemies. The attack hits several opponents at once. One of the minister's followers is completely overwhelmed by the energy. Another cries out as he is overcome by the warrior's attack. Then, Jaewon dashes forward at high speed, cutting through several adversaries in his path. But as he looks on, he realizes they just keep coming. The captain of the Shadow Soul unit and the other warriors surround him, ready to strike. Jaewon just sits at the situation, so the Prime Minister rushes toward him for a direct confrontation. But the warrior attacks him with a simple thrust, which unleashes a massive wave of energy. The force of the energy spreads, shaking and destroying the entire area. In that instant, the minister realizes he was wrong and that they won't be able to stop him. He tries to counterattack with a slash of energy. However, he is violently thrown to the ground. Mayhem looks up and sees his opponent standing on the rubble. He then thinks that he would have been defeated if he had stayed in his path. Meanwhile, Jaher, supported by Jurgen, is amazed by how powerful the warrior is. Then, one of the followers asks Maihan if they should proceed with Plan B in case they can't create the seal. The minister insists they must release the Black Cloud, even if it dooms everyone in Gorgon. At that moment, Jaewon glares at him with a serious, intimidating look. He calls him by his full name, Maihan Keldegren, and identifies him as Minister and Chief Elder of the Golden Sky Clan. Then he grabs him by the face and states that while he doesn't know his plans, he knows one thing. As a sinister energy emanates from his body, he declares that he likes guys like him. The Prime Minister screams in desperation, saying that he's coming, and orders everyone to stop him at all costs. But the warrior continues, stating that thanks to people like them, he doesn't feel bad about destroying this world as an immense energy rises through the area. Suddenly, he raises his sword, which draws all enemies toward him. He then looks up with a faint smile, and a pillar of light erupts from the castle toward the sky. The beam of energy shoots up and pierces the clouds. The energy then expands and explodes in the sky as the minister watches. Meanwhile, Jaher rushes over to help him up from the ground. In the background, Jurgen remembers the unwavering hope the Lord mentioned. In a distant memory, the castle lord tells him that the people of Gorgon need an unwavering hope. The beams of energy then rain down on the minister's followers. The Lord adds that this hope cannot be brought down by anything. Jurgen laments having found his lord's hope in a man who intends to destroy the world. Soon, the dust begins to settle. The defeated followers lie scattered across the floor. Maihan, defeated, calls the warrior a monster and claims it's too late for Gorgon. He adds that it's also too late for the castle lord. Jaewan lands among the fallen adversaries. Then, Jaher and Jurgen approach, and he asks if the old doctor is still asleep. Jaher replies that he won't wake up, and the warrior grabs him without hesitation. He then hurls him forcefully against the wall as Jaher shouts and questions him. Suddenly, Xiangyo awakens, complaining of pain, and Jaiwan comments that he should have woken up sooner. But before they can react, the castle lord's hair begins to move on its own. Then his hand also moves, as a notification warns that his contamination has exceeded the limit. Meanwhile, a warning announces that the spiritual contamination has exceeded its limit, as the system calculates the danger level. Jaher cries out for his lord, but the system fails to complete the calculation. Soon, Xiangyo watches the scene as the system confirms the verdict. Giant undead. Then, Gorgon's automatic alarm activates, echoing throughout the city. Immediately, people run through the streets in a panic. A guard orders everyone to evacuate, ensuring no one else gets hurt. He then looks up at the castle, wondering what is happening. At that moment, a dark and sinister aura begins to envelop the entire fortress. Xiangyo reacts quickly, ordering Captain Jahir to get the Prime Minister out of there. The warrior agrees. Right after, the doctor asks Jawan to stay and help him, complaining that his thrusts are too sharp. But the young warrior just yells for them to stop talking and charges forward with his sword. Then, the two of them leap together toward the castle lord. With all his might, the doctor swings his blade, delivering a powerful blow against the target. In that instant, a memory surfaces of Jurgen telling the lord he's had enough to drink, while Jair encourages him. Another memory shows Xiangyo explaining that to use the undead sever, one must imbue it with memories. He continues, saying that with enough memories, it would be possible to stop the undead transformation. But in the memory, the old man sighs and backs away. In the past, he sees his lord in a dark place and calls out to him. However, the figure in front of him begins to slowly contort. Suddenly, two red eyes glow in the darkness, and he realizes, terrified, that this thing is not the real castle lord. In the present, the lord's eyes glow again with a crimson light. Xiangyo shouts that something is wrong, calling Jawan old man to warn him. In that instant, the warrior realizes that being is no longer the castle lord. He understands that another presence has taken control as the chains begin to break. Soon, the restraints break completely. The lord's body begins to distort and swell into a grotesque form. Jae-won and the doctor watch the transformation on high alert. Then, a single red eye glows from between the deformed being's hair. The skeletal creature begins to float in the air, enveloped by a dark energy. At that moment, Xiangyo yells that this isn't the castle lord, as he recognizes the entity before them. The creature's foot descends, touching the ground slowly. Then it stomps down hard, releasing a devastating wave of energy. Jae-won and the doctor react to the immense spiritual pressure spreading through the basement. The entity, surprised, comments on having taken form in this body, and then it declares that the castle lord has finally become one of the undead. Meanwhile, it says it sees a familiar face and turns its gaze to Xiangyo. Then the creature asks what an incomplete awakened is still doing in chaos after having been to the abyss. Then the doctor recognizes him as Catastrophe, the solitary king of chaos and the only one capable of opening the gate to the abyss. Jae-won grinds his teeth as the entity's hand cracks in the air. Next, the being moves forward with an outstretched hand, questioning why he hasn't left chaos. Right after, it unleashes a powerful blast of energy in all directions. The impact throws Jae-won backward, and the creature questions his intention to save the world. Xiangyo gasps, realizing the attack was unleashed with a simple wave of the hand. Shortly after, he notices that the entity has completely erased the world he had created. Then, Catastrophe snaps its fingers and asks who stands before it. The creature calls him an interesting human for having fully awakened and still keeping his mind intact. The doctor finally understands that the undead incarnation is one of the solitary king's abilities, used to possess the lord. He also realizes that this monster is just one of Catastrophe's clones, and even as just a copy, its power is simply overwhelming. Jae-won turns and calls him old man. At that moment, Xiangyo asks him if the undead sever failed, but the warrior holds up two fingers and says that, actually, he really wants to defeat this thing with his own two hands. The creature smiles, intrigued, and asks if he's referring to it. Then, it faces its opponent, doubting he's capable of defeating it. The entity reveals its monstrous form and finds the whole situation amusing. Xiangyo stumbles back and yells for Jae-won not not to attack it. He warns him desperately that not even Mulak was a match for Catastrophe, and this was still just a clone, but Jaewon tells him not to worry as he believes he can defeat it. However, the doctor doesn't understand how he can be so calm in the face of such a powerful enemy. The creature lets out a loud, mocking laugh. It then covers its face with its hands and then cracks its neck in a frightening way. Jaewon readies for the attack, sword in hand. Jaewon calls it a foolish awakened. Finally, Catastrophe counterattacks, calling him an awakened with a human mind. However, Jaewon summons his Void Blade. Meanwhile, Cheongyo remembers that terrifying sword that turned half the expedition into undead, something he never imagined he'd see again. Soon after, Catastrophe moves in to attack the warrior. The creature strikes swiftly with its blade. In the middle of the fight, she comments that she's seen that look on his face before. In that instant, the entity realizes he's heading for the abyss. Surprised, Cheongyo is stunned. He never believed the man would dare to go there. The creature watches him closely, stating he's too weak to reach the end of the world. She then grabs the adversary's face forcefully. The entity compares him to an ancient dream being, saying he isn't as powerful as that one. Soon after, she grabs her opponent's arm firmly. With a powerful move, she throws him far away. However, the warrior's arm is severely injured in the attack. He's thrown back, crashing against the wall. Despite his injury, he examines the wound and prepares to continue. Then, he charges at Catastrophe, who counters with her transformed arm. She lunges with a punch, but he dodges the blow with a swift kick. Catastrophe swings her arm again to attack. The impact hits the ground, creating a huge crater of debris. A fragment of the creature falls amidst the dust. As she approaches, she remarks that the contamination is a disease of time. The entity explains that even the slightest contact with the Void Blade causes centuries of aging. The creature's face begins to slowly change. She continues, saying that spirits can't withstand the passage of time and end up becoming undead. The warrior looks at his own arm and asks if she's referring to that. Then, he focuses his energy on his shoulder. Right after, he separates the contaminated part of his spirit, saying he can just remove it. Catastrophe admires his willpower for severing a part of his own spirit, but claims it's all he has left. The creature's body begins to crack and expand. The man just watches the scene intently. Soon after, the creature reveals an even more monstrous form and faces him. In response, she attacks with several spikes of dark energy. Finally, Cheongyo is hit by the blow and falls to the ground. But Jaewon still blocks the attack, and the creature questions him about the sword he brought from the tower. Soon after, the entity calls him a toy and shoves him back forcefully. Meanwhile, Cheongyo warns him of the danger, but the warrior replies that he already knows. He then uses his dagger to focus his energy on his shoulder. Right after, he steps on one of the tentacles and charges forward to attack. The two clash in a powerful battle of blades. The impact throws the fighter backward. Then, Catastrophe warns him that he'll run out of spirit if he keeps using his energy that way. He agrees, realizing he can't go on like this. At that moment, he notices he can't see the creature's weaknesses, and strange particles break his concentration. As he tries to recover, he explains that his unique world is the White Realm of Remembrance, created to preserve the memory of those who have passed. He continues, saying that all awakened beings have their own unique world. It's revealed that these worlds are formed from a keyword, and that the most powerful are able to populate them. Decided on what to do, he crushes something in his hand. Immediately after, he charges forward and lands a direct punch to Catastrophe's face. The force of the impact drags her backward, sliding across the ground. An energy begins to crackle around the warrior's eye. He stomps firmly on the ground, which cracks and glows as he utters Oblivion. The scenery distorts, turning into a desolate place where the two face each other under a red eye in the sky. Fallon Cheongyo observes the new environment and calls it a terrible place. In shock, he wonders if this is the world Jaewon has lived in all this time. The doctor describes the place as a space dominated by intense feelings. He concludes that all this feeling is directed against the world itself. Catastrophe looks up at the eye in the sky and exclaims that this is her opponent's ideal. The creature finds the situation amusing and lets out a sinister laugh. In that instant, the warrior hits her with a powerful punch to the face. He realizes the annoying particles have vanished. The blow damages the creature's face. However, energy tentacles emerge from the ground to trap him. Quickly, the fighter spins his body and breaks free from the restraints. Catastrophe comments that he keeps fighting, but he still doesn't know how to finish her. Soon after, the creature rushes forward at high speed with her hand raised to strike. A devastating punch hits him squarely, sending him crashing to the ground. Even so, Jaewon withstands the impact with resilience. The ground trembles and shatters from the force of the attack. However, Catastrophe presses him against the broken ground. Frightened, Cheongyo wonders what is happening. Meanwhile, the terrain continues to crumble under their colossal strength. The creature sinks him into a dark liquid, stating that he refuses to abandon his own feelings. Amidst the situation, Catastrophe comments that she hasn't found someone this amusing in centuries, then manifests a new energy from her chest. Soon after, she steps on the warrior's submerged body and wields a dark sword. With a cold tone, she declares that the fight was fun, but unfortunately, it has come to an end. Submerged, he just stares at her through the murky waters. Suddenly, his eyes glow intensely and a powerful energy begins to emanate from his body. Suddenly, a blade of energy strikes Catastrophe's face. Immediately after, the same force erupts from the ground and hits the creature's body. The entity's altered eye just watches the liquid churn around her. In that instant, Jaewan emerges from the water and asks if she really thinks it's all over. He rises, wielding a new sword, and firmly states that it's just beginning. However, the creature's body regenerates completely, and she declares that she hasn't taken any damage yet. In response, her body transforms into a furious mass of advancing tentacles. The warrior is captured amidst the tentacles and immediately reacts to the attack. The extensions squeeze him tightly until they begin to crack. He laments the situation as an intense energy starts pulsing from his body. Amidst the chaos, he wonders what he is seeing in that form. Enraged, Catastrophe rushes to attack. The warrior manages to block the attack from the tentacle lunging toward him. Soon after, the entity fires a beam of energy. The impact throws Jaewan into a whirlwind of rocks and debris. Even wounded, he reacts to the blow, trying to recover. The creature then shatters the surrounding rocks to pursue him. He leaps away, distancing himself from the immense monstrous form. He then readies his sword, gathering power for a new attack. His blade collides with Catastrophe's strike in a bright explosion of energy. During the clash, the entity claims to have seen countless beings create their own worlds in search of answers to their curiosity. She faces him and questions what truth he seeks to find in a world like this. The warrior blocks another powerful attack, but the impact throws him to the ground again. Suddenly, Catastrophe understands his intention. With a grave voice, she declares that he wants to ask about the very existence of this world. The entity questions him about what this place means to him, if it would be eradication. Still in combat, the creature insists, asking if what he seeks is annihilation or extermination. Finally, she seems to understand the true essence of his purpose. Then, Catastrophe reveals that the only word capable of defining his ideal is destruction. Thus, she claims this is the only word that truly fits this world. Immediately, the entity calls him arrogant for daring to question the value of the Tree of Illusion. She then attacks him furiously, accusing him of using his own world to challenge the tree's existence, but the warrior firmly denies it. Soon he rises from the dark liquid, surprising the creature. Catastrophe then realizes he never intended to ask a question. She just watches his determination as he stands up. The man stares at her in silence without uttering a single word. The entity asks him to wait a moment, confused by what she's seeing. In that instant, Jaewan recalls having faced something similar before. Suddenly, he understands that the thing before him is just a clone that has taken over the castle lord's body. He stomps firmly on the ground and decides what must be done. Then his arm begins to transform before the creature's eyes. Energy envelops it, completely regenerating the injured limb, and he lunges to attack. Catastrophe reacts with surprise at the unexpected regeneration. Soon, a powerful wave of energy splits the entity's form. A colossal explosion follows, illuminating the entire area. Smoke and debris scatter everywhere. Fragments of the creature's form fall to the ground amidst the chaos. Between grunts, Catastrophe accuses him of having lost his mind. With contempt, she calls him a fool for not yet realizing he can't defeat her. The creature grumbles, saying she's getting bored and it's time to end this. The warrior silently faces the gigantic, monstrous form before him. Soon, an energy begins to crackle around his eye. He leaps onto the creature, driven by pure determination. Then, he propels himself even higher, guided by an overwhelming force. During the jump, he observes the glowing energy particles around him. Upon landing on one of the entity's tentacles, he confirms his suspicion. He realizes that this part is directly connected to the main body and grabs it tightly. Then, he pulls the tentacle with all his accumulated energy. In a single devastating move, he slams the creature to the ground with force. Catastrophe stares at him, stunned amidst the consuming energy. The entity murmurs suspiciously, wondering if this is a Fisher technique. Soon after, the monstrous body dissolves into countless fragments of energy. As she dissolves, she declares that she will wait for the one who chose destruction at the entrance to the abyss. The creature's fragments dissolve completely into the dark liquid covering the ground. Exhausted after the long battle, Jaewan remains silent. Finally, he sits down and breathes a sigh of relief beside the inert form of the castle lord.